not getting it mine.
Ready?
That was so weird.
I'd like to call the special meeting of the Board of Education to order. Laura, can you call the roll, please?
Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Niznik.
Here.
Rajpal.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Sis.
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like to clarify in the record that the Board of Education has issues to discuss in executive session. May I have a motion? Lisa?
I, Lisa Sweeney Moran, make a motion to convene into executive session pursuant to CRS 246402-4B to confer with an attorney for the school board for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions relating to pending litigation on the following issues. Title IX, employment regarding a bus driver's termination, EEOC, CCRD, OCR complaints alleging age, gender, race, and disability discrimination in student special education matters.
Is there a second?
I second.
Laura, can you call the roll on the motion to convene into executive session, please?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We are now convening into executive session. We're just waiting for 1 second while we get the public participation list in order, and then we'll start the meeting. Are you sure? Okay. Rob, Emma? Okay. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, October 25th. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Niznik.
Here.
Rajpal.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Zis.
Here.
And
Thank
I
you.
guess to be more accurate, we are reconvening after having met in executive session. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us electronically on BV22. We're glad to have you observe and participate in our meetings. At this time, is there a motion to approve the agenda for this evening? So moved. Kitty, seconded by Beth. Laura, could you call the roll, please?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We'll begin this evening, as we always do, with the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson, good evening.
Good evening, Board President Gebhardt, members of the board, and so many of our community that were able to join us this evening. Board members have a few things to talk to you all about, and I'd like to start with the incident that happened at Fairview High School last week, talk a little bit about that. Certainly there's some opportunities that we learned on how we can get better. As we all know, we had a threat investigation last week at Fairview High involving a former student. And we've received a lot of feedback from our community, especially our parents, in regards to our response to this emergency, most specifically, the lack of speed of communication that went to our parents in regards to what was going on. In this situation, I'd like to start by commending Boulder PD and our partners in law enforcement for their quick actions to be able to allow us to work collaboratively to make sure that even before the day started, that we had the threat under control with the student, the former student. We were in contact with him and knew where he was before the school day even started. And because of that, we made the decision not to activate the standard response protocol, which would have prompted the immediate emergency alerts that I think parents have become accustomed to. The challenge that we had was that the information was not immediately available to our families, and it took too long for this information to go out. And without that communication, with the speed of social media and the images that parents were seeing, students were seeing, we created, by not communicating faster, a sense of panic through social media and in our community. And I want to start by apologizing to our community for this delay in communicating. We struggle with the challenge of making sure that information is properly vetted and accurate before we share it out. And we have to balance that with the need for people to know what's going on, especially when it comes to the safety of their kids. And we know that we have to strike this balance and do a better job with that. So as always, following any crisis, we're going to be coming together as a team to review the response that we had to the emergency with an eye towards improvement. I know that our communications team is already committed to finding ways to get preliminary information out sooner to families and using some of the same channels that we typically share for emergency alerts. It's important to note that while communication may have been delayed, the safety responses by security and law enforcement, again, were immediate. After receiving the Safe to Tell report that morning, both our BVSD security team and law enforcement responded incredibly quickly to investigate and address the threat, and ultimately the suspect was arrested. So just wanted to start the meeting by addressing that. I know many of our community members here have pretty deep concerns, and that's why they're here. We'll probably be speaking to that this evening. Please know and understand that we strive to do better. Again, thanking our partners in law enforcement, our BVSD security team, and working to better make sure that we're communicating at a speed that matches the needs of our community. The second thing that I'd like to talk about was a Target donation program that happened this week. A lot of our teachers have been stopping by the Ed Center to take advantage of pallets worth of free supplies donated by Target in Superior. As you'll recall, the Target was damaged in the Marshall fire and reopened this fall, but too late to sell the shipment of school supplies they had. So they reached out and donated them to BVSD. Impact on Education, our partners, helped us to get everything organized. And yesterday, teachers and school staff began to stop by to pick up items, starting with schools. Fire. I want to say a special thank you to Target, our partners in Impact of Education, Mayor of Superior, Clint Folsom, who also was happening to stop by, and all of our BVSD staff who made this distribution a success. And then finally, I would love to introduce this meeting's student moment. It's my pleasure to introduce the students from the Latinos in Action program at Boulder High School. Jane Moody, who's an instructional coach at Boulder High, is going to help introduce the group, which is doing a lot of great work in our community. We're so excited to have you. Jane, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation and for the opportunity to have some of our students share more about the work that they're doing. My name is Jane Moody. I'm an instructional coach at Boulder High, and I have the privilege of teaching the Latinos in Action class. Latinos in Action is a new leadership class at Boulder High. We have a diverse combination of students in the program. About a third of our students are high achieving in the traditional sense. Another third are newcomers or students receiving CLDE services. So these are students who've recently moved to the United States. And another third, or even a little more, are students who are recognized as having untapped potential. We have two students here tonight who are going to share a little more about the program and the work they've been doing. So I want to introduce Valeria Arellano, who is a senior, and Yaretsi Santos, who's a sophomore.
All right. So our class is a leadership class. It's part of a national program, and it's new at Boulder High and as well as in the Boulder Valley School District. Our focus is empowering Latino youth to lead and strengthen our communities. It is an asset-based, building it on our bilingualism and biculturalism. So the pillars of Latinos in Action are leadership development, service learning, excellence in education, and college and career readiness and planning.
So a big part of this class is that on Thursdays, which is block days for us when we have a longer class period, we go to Columbine Elementary School and we tutor the kids there. And we tutor them in a bunch of subjects. We have kindergarten math, first grade math, second grade lunch and recess, where we really focus on sportsmanship. We do third grade reading and literacy, which is all in Spanish. It's also fourth grade literacy and reading, which is also in Spanish, and then 5th grade recess and lunch. And I do 3rd grade reading and literacy, and Valeria does 1st grade math. Oh, and Isaac, he does 4th grade literacy and reading. And we do this for the whole year.
All right, we have communities. There are 3: service community, professional committee, and the service community. Each committee plans to organize a minimum of event for quarter.
So the focus of the service committee is to give back to our community, school, and country by planning and participating in service projects that make a positive difference. The first activity that we did for the first quarter of the year was a fundraiser for EFA, which stands for Emergency Family Assistance and Association, and we sold scarves at Boulder High soccer and football games. The second activity, which is something that we're working on right now, is planning a toy drive and also volunteering at Share a Gift in December to provide toys for young children in BVSD.
All right, for the professional community, our focus is to organize activities that promote career exploration, higher education, and professional behavior. First activity, we're going to visit the University of Colorado, November 2nd. We plan to visit CU for admission, information presentation, and a welcome tour of the campus. And for activity number 2, we're going to Front Ranch Community College information session of November 8th. We invited a bilingual administration and outreach representative from Front Ranch to visit our class. For activity number 3, guest speaker on how to pay for college, we plan to invite an expert of the college application process to learn about the application, financial aid, and scholarship.
So our final committee is the social committee, and the focus is to organize events that develop a sense of community and promote social interactions and build relationship among LIA students, the student body, teachers, parents, and the community. So our first activity, which we already did back in September, was we attended a Boulder High soccer game, and the reason why we did this is because we invited the newcomer students to go with us, because we wanted to welcome, the newcomer students and build more of a sense of community for everyone at Boulder High. And then the next activity that we're planning is Friendsgiving potluck, and what we are going to do is we're going to invite some of the staff from our school, and we're just going to host a Friendsgiving potluck with foods from our cultures before Thanksgiving.
Thank you for the invitation and this opportunity to share our work. Any questions?
I have a question. Can I buy a scarf?
Yes.
Good. How do I do that?
We can connect with the students for all
Okay.
board members. I'm guessing we'll want 7 scarves, 8. Make that 8. And that is all for superintendent comments this evening.
Thank you, and thank you very much for coming. It's just great to see the work that you're doing, and we wish you all the best, and we look forward to hearing all of the progress that you're making through the school year. So thanks for coming, being patient for us starting a little bit late, and it's great seeing you all. Thank you. So board members, do we have any questions for Dr. Anderson based on his report? I don't see any questions, Dr. Anderson, so I think we will move on to public participation. Members of the public who wish to speak at tonight's meeting were asked to sign up prior to noon today by submitting the request to speak during public participation form that can be found on the BVSD website or by contacting the board secretary, Laura Schaefer. Public participants have the option to attend the meeting in person or join and present their comments via Google Meet. The board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operation of the schools. We believe that public comments that are critical of district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticism of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all staff, and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personnel issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. To ensure that the meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board, 1, confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items, and I believe all our speakers tonight are non-agenda items. Is that right, Laura? Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will be at the end of the meeting, and I will address that as soon as I finish reading my litany of cautions about public participation. If you run out of time or you would like to share additional information, you may email the board, and I will recognize that we've received numerous emails, and we read all of our emails. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. I may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. This video will be recorded for public viewing into perpetuity. BVSD reserves the right to remove you from the meeting if your video includes material that is inappropriate for the public or BVSD students. You will see a yellow card when you have 30 seconds remaining. When you have 10 seconds, you will see the orange card. Please wrap up your comments. At the end of your 2 minutes, a timer will sound and your microphone will be muted, and you can see the timer right here. Board members, what I would like to do is get through all of the public comment, not ask any of them to stick around after our meeting. So if there is a motion to amend our policy so that we can hear all of the public comment at once. It's moved by Kitty, seconded by Beth. Could you call the roll real quickly, Laura?
Garcia,
Yes.
Gebhardt,
Yes.
Niznik,
Yes.
Rajpal,
Yes.
Sargent,
Yes.
Sweeney Moran,
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So what that means is we'll just get through all of the public participation without asking you to wait till the end of the meeting, because I think we have more than 60 minutes worth of public participation potentially. So this brings us to the speakers on non-agenda, and generally our practice has also been to start with our students first and then move into the parents and participants. I don't think these are in any particular order other than how they signed up. So don't think that we're like prioritizing one over another. It's just the way it shows up on the sign-up sheet. So our first student is Minna Most, who has been given 2 minutes by Maxine Most, as if I read this correctly.
Thank you so much. Hello, my name is Minna Most. I'm a senior at Monarch High School, and I will be presenting on the findings of a research paper I completed that assessed BVSD's sex education program. Comprehensive sex education is crucial in empowering teenagers to make informed and safe decisions about their sexual health and experiences. This is especially true in the aftermath of the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision. I feel that my BVSD sex education did not give me the knowledge to confidently make decisions around my sexual identity and health, so I wanted to find out if this was just my experience or one shared by other BVSD students. I began by speaking to local experts on curriculum and sex education. I looked through Colorado laws and BVSD's curriculum requirements. I discovered that while sex education is not mandatory in Colorado public schools, if it is taught, it must be comprehensive and medically accurate, must teach consent, must be inclusive of the health needs of LGBTQ+ students, and may not emphasize abstinence as the sole acceptable preventative measure against pregnancies and STDs. BVSD's curriculum states that students should know the structure and functions of the reproductive system, which STDs can be cured, prevented by vaccine, and treated, and have strategies to resist pressure to have sex. Given my own experience and my newfound understanding of what was legally required, I was curious how my peers felt about BVSD sex education. I designed a survey that would provide student assessment of how well curriculum was being implemented, whether students felt their needs were being addressed, and how much critical knowledge was being retained by students. My survey is a voluntary response survey with undercoverage, meaning that it is not a valid statistical sampling. However, I believe the data suggests issues in sex education curriculum and implementation that warrant further investigation by the Board of Education. Charts and data analysis are included in the PowerPoint that I sent to the BVSD Board of Ed on Sunday, but I will highlight the data most concerning to me that showed either BVSD curriculum or state law were not being adequately covered. 86% of those surveyed said that LGBTQ+ sexual health was not mentioned or only somewhat learned. And when I read through BVSD curriculum, there was not a single mention of LGBTQ+ sexual health. 79% of students said their BVSD curriculum did not prepare them for what to do if they thought they were pregnant. 62% of students said their BVSD curriculum did not prepare them to resist pressure for sex. Over half of students thought their teacher wasn't comfortable teaching the material, and only 30% of students thought their teacher was even very prepared to teach the material. Over 50% of students said abstinence was either emphasized or heavily emphasized. Given these findings, I strongly encourage the Board of Education to consider the following steps. 1, take a stratified random sample of surveys of students to get a more accurate measure of how effectively the current curriculum is being implemented across the district. Use the survey to help reassess curriculum and the following issues: emphasis on abstinence, the focus on prevention, but not what to do if prevention methods fail. Students learn about contraception, but not how to acquire it. They learn about STDs, but not where to get treated or tested. And there is no mention of LGBTQ+ sexual health. 3, ensure teachers feel comfortable teaching and prepared to teach. And 4, schools and teachers should be informed about resources like the Boulder Valley Women's Health Clinic, who can support teachers and directly teach certain subjects. I would be happy to discuss my research, survey, and findings with you in detail at your convenience, and I would really appreciate the opportunity to be involved as appropriate in any actions that the Board of Education or BVSD administration decide to take in regards to improving our sex education program. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ofek Turner. Right. I do have an email, but he was also listed here, so that's fine. We can move on. Summer Gould.
Hello, my name is Summer Gould, and I'm a senior at Fairview High School. I'm here to talk about the recent events and threats that happened at my school last Wednesday. The way that this was handled honestly makes me upset. On Wednesday, I genuinely felt unsafe and scared to come to school. It was a block day, so I had the first 2 periods off, but my friend called me and told me what was happening at school, and it was all over social media before the school even announced anything. My friend told me people were running out of the doors, crying, freaking out, and on the phone with their parents. Some of my friends were on the target list, and they were scared for their lives. It should never have to be this way at school. No kid should ever feel so unsafe at their own school that they feel the need to leave. There were 1,500 absences at Fairview that day, and nobody knew what to do. Teachers didn't even know what was happening, so they were telling kids all different information. The school didn't release any information until about an hour and a half after school started, yet they received the Safe to Tell call before school hours and gave no warning. Kids came to school with no notice. Another thing that really makes me mad is some teachers were offering their students extra credit to stay in class. It should never be the case that a student is discredited for leaving school if they feel unsafe. The way this was handled genuinely upsets me, and we need to have tighter security outside of school. As of right now, anybody can get in whenever because there are always people there to open the doors. Someone should be checking identification and outside protecting the school. No one should ever feel unsafe at their own school, and no one should come to school and be worried for their life. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Athena Sapurn.
Hi, my name is Athena Sapurn, and I'm a junior at Boulder High School. After last week's shooting threat, I wanted to tell you that my friends and I don't feel safe and don't see the adults doing enough to keep us safe. We don't have any security at my school. We only have 2 hall monitors for over 2,000 kids, and the only thing that they have to protect us is a walkie-talkie. They wouldn't be able to protect us from anyone, let alone someone with a gun. Lockdowns don't make me feel safe or protect me. If a shooter is a student, which it likely would be, they will know what the lockdown procedure is because they have rehearsed it a multitude of times. On the day that the shooter was threatening Fairview, there were so many students from Fairview walking inside of my school. If innocent people from Fairview can get into our school, who's to say that someone with a weapon cannot? I am scared to be in my school, and I am scared to be around my school. There needs to be more security and safety in and around our schools. Teenagers cannot protect themselves against guns or any other weapon. At the very least, I would like a cop car to be outside of the school so that there is a way to protect us. And I would feel much safer if there is someone there at all times that's able to protect us like a cop. Thank you.
All right, thank you. That ends the student public participation. We'll now move on to the adult participation. The first speaker that I have is Jennifer Rhodes, who's been given 2 minutes by Michelle Potratz.
Hi, before I introduce myself, I'd like to just say that there are two big issues being discussed here by different parents, one addressing kids' safety and the threat of a shooting, and one addressing everyday threats to kids at school. Both are crucial that require strategies. My name is Dr. Jennifer Rhodes, and I'm the mother of 2 children at BVSD schools. I'm also a psychiatrist with years of experience treating the mentally ill. I'm very concerned with safety around Boulder, particularly around our schools and on the paths that children use to get to school. BVSD has an entire webpage on safe routes to school that emphasizes that taking these paths is good for mental and physical health. Unfortunately, the paths in so many areas around the schools have become unsafe. Ironically, my kids ride their bikes on the streets instead because they feel safer to get to school that way. Both of my daughters have had multiple interactions with adult men harassing them, lunging at them, or asking them for drugs. My 12-year-old now has a startle response on the path because she's afraid. This is the reality of our children's school day. A menacing environment is just part of the problem. Over the years, access to drugs around school premises has increased exponentially. Because of unenforced laws, our children now have unfettered access to dangerous drugs sold by adults just outside schools. Injectable drugs like fentanyl and meth have become such a problem around Boulder High that Boulder County Health has placed a large sharp spin behind the school. Is that really the best that we can do? This is the environment that BVSD oversees, and unfortunately, it's our children's everyday reality. Tents with unhoused individuals, many of whom are using and selling drugs, are on a cycle of camping near the school, being asked to leave by police, only to pop back up within weeks. This has been a chronic problem, and parents have been complaining for years. I trained at city hospitals in New York City and was an attending physician at the Bellevue Hospital Psych ER, the largest in the country. My job was to evaluate and help the unhoused mentally ill. These are not the people that parents are concerned about hurting our kids. We are concerned about drug dealers that are selling fentanyl and meth and harassing our kids. Let's not confuse the two populations. There's a huge difference between the vulnerable unhoused and those that are committing crimes in Boulder. Chief of Police Maris Harold and the DA agree that crime has increased significantly. Deadly drugs are easily accessible, and vulnerable kids are being targeted on your watch. Enough is enough. What are you waiting for? For a child to die? For someone to get raped? There is an indisputable association between drug use and violent crime. What are we waiting for? Parents are fed up. Over the past few days, we've collected over 1,200 signatures on a petition asking for an increased police presence in school neighborhoods to deter and monitor illegal activity. In addition, we propose a safety plan. 1, BVSD must coordinate with law enforcement and the City Council to create a zero-tolerance safe zone to combat illegal activity in school neighborhoods. The safe zone means no camping, no drugs, no violence, no harassment near our kids. No tents should ever be going up near schools. 2, we want messaging to go out to students, parents, teachers, and the public that any harassment, violence, drugs, camping, or other illegal activity be reported to BVSD security immediately through a text messaging system. Safe to Tell should be an app on everyone's phone. Let's get every incident recorded. 3, parents want BVSD board and the superintendent to meet regularly with the chief of police and city council to coordinate and strategize how to implement a zero-tolerance safety zone around our schools. I spoke with Chief Harold, and she wants to collaborate with you. Parents also want principal and teacher representation at these meetings because they are the best sense of what's going on in our kids' school day. Now, I've been told to watch what I say because one of you will mock me and tweet about me. I want to set an example by confronting this directly and hopefully neutralize some of the threat that people feel under the leadership of some of you. Teachers and parents are afraid of speaking out because of a culture that some on this board have created. I've had teachers email me privately because they're afraid of losing their jobs. Miss Sweeney Moran, I am here on behalf of the safety of all children. Mocking me or anyone else after speaking publicly about the safety of kids is just inappropriate, and it needs to stop. Please make our kids safe again. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Valerie Love, who I believe has been given 2 minutes by David Alper.
Thank you. Aloha. My name is Valerie Love. I'm a mom of 2 Boulder High kids and a former addict. I know each person in this room shares the goal to keep all kids safe. We can also agree the whole system is broken: education, healthcare, economy, housing, justice, etc. The obstacles to achieving top-notch safety for our kids is lack of understanding of all the facts, apathy, and sadly, politics. We must address safety as a 3-part solution: short, medium, and long-term approaches. We need to protect kids from a potential shooter and active threat. We need to protect them from predator drug dealers and harassment near schools. And we need to help prevent bullying and support mental health for kids so kids don't turn into shooters and predators. We need a kids' bill of rights, and we need a 1,000-foot safety bubble around all the kids' schools, everywhere. Illegal drug users and pushers should face tougher sentencing, including mandatory jail time for dealers. One of my teachers says proximity is power. Proximity is also poison. It's paramount that we protect the children's mental health from repeated daily exposure to easy access to unsafe people, places, and things. Because of unsafe surroundings, kids have to wear an unconscious suit of mental armor that takes up valuable energy and causes trauma that could otherwise be used for learning, health, and growing. This is from the Urban Dictionary. Located in Boulder, Colorado, this lovely group of kids ranging from 8th graders to high school seniors have claimed the Boulder Creek area as their #1 spot to do every drug imaginable. They meet in the morning during lunch and after school, but many skip class and end up being there the whole day. The drugs they do: weed, acid, mushrooms, Molly, DMT, and more. To join Creek, you're usually invited down to the morning spot by someone you know, one at a time. Then that turns into a few more times until you start going there on your own. Creek kids can basically get any drug at any time and know the best plugs in Boulder. Plugs are drug dealers. As a former alcohol addict, I know what it takes to get and stay clean, and I know what happens if you don't. You relapse. I was crippled with shame, and my loved ones tried to help me by going easy, but the only thing that ever works is to remove the substance and the unhealthy, enabling environment. It takes a brave person to speak up. Did you know there's a shame list going around the schools for kids who speak up? Did you know that local businesses are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of being boycotted and harassed? So when a student or a community member speaks up about their safety, they do not need to be mocked, slandered, or shamed by a school board member who should be keeping kids safe. The father of the 14-year-old girl recently reported missing for 10 days after a Boulder High School football game reports that she was repeatedly exposed to a wide variety of bad influences by adults that congregate near the creek by the high school. So just like it's incorrect to categorize all unhoused people as predators, it's equally incorrect to judge all police as bad actors. A problem here is a member of the school board is a plaintiff in an active lawsuit with the ACLU against the city of Boulder and the chief of police about encampment bans. In my opinion, this contradicts the ethical duty as a school board member to keep our kids safe and is a conflict of interest. I believe this member needs to decide if they would like to prioritize keeping 30,000 kids safe with the safety bubble zone or prioritize the needs of roughly 1,000 unhoused people. Both are noble pursuits. We are all sensitive to the suffering of those experiencing homelessness and understand it's a complex issue. Keeping our kids safe from predators who hide among the vulnerable unhoused, as well as next to the creek, must be a priority and cannot be done when there is an active lawsuit from a school board member who is posting misleading videos of safety issues on social media, mocking people who speak up, and suing the police and city that are tasked with keeping Boulder safe. I propose we create a kids' Bill of Rights and safety bubble zone of at least 1,000 feet around every school with more trained patrols or SROs or whatever they're called, and work with local law enforcement and criminal justice to keep all the kids safe inside and around the schools. Thank you for your time and your swift action.
Thank you. Next, we have Marla Shapiro. Is Marla here?
She may not be here.
She may not be here.
She messaged me thinking it was for next month.
Oh, all right. So,
So
maybe we'll see her.
and she didn't respond to my follow-up email.
All right, so we'll see Marla another time. Heidi Kapari.
Hello, my name is Heidi Kapari. I am a BVSD parent of a Fairview senior and a Boulder High School freshman. So representing both high schools, very interesting. Thank you all for having us here and for being gracious and willing to hear challenging things. And I really believe in collaborating, in problem solving. I am a youth empowerment and entrepreneurship coach for the past 8 years, and I've been a pioneer in impact investing and systemic collaborative approaches to change for 18 years. I believe every stakeholder in a system should be heard, seen, and respected, and that when we take a problem-solving collaborative approach, we can achieve anything together. In a community of highly educated, wealthy citizens, we owe it to our children to respect each other's differences and come up with solutions to help our kids feel safe and be safe in school. The first steps in problem solving is to listen to all stakeholders, acknowledge where there are breakdowns, and then get to work implementing solutions for the challenges that were heard. I recommend the district acknowledge the impact of the last 3 years of incidences, including sexual harassment cases at Fairview, the changing leadership, the mass shooting less than a mile from their school perpetrated by a previously bullied teen, COVID closures and isolation, overall trauma from COVID, returning to school and feeling behind, and socio-political and climate emergencies, and more. The teachers, administrators, and the students all suffered, and everyone is now feeling the effects of pushing and going back to business as usual. Everybody is a little traumatized. Everybody is more reactive than they were before. We owe it to ourselves to take a deep breath. There is nothing about the world right now that is business as usual, and the students know it. Now they just need you, the board, to know it and show that you know it. In not fully acknowledging what's happened.
So, Ms. Kapari, if you could wrap up your comments and then send us your email, that would be great, because the timer already went.
Okay.
So I don't want to interrupt you. I want to give you a chance to finish.
That's okay. Yeah, I know there were two, the youth that didn't show up donated me the 2 minutes, but that's okay.
Oh, that's fine. We didn't know that. So if you can.
I'm happy to end. I'm happy to.
And please send us your comments too, so we can read them, because
Okay.
they're very impactful, but go ahead and finish. I
Okay.
don't want to interrupt you.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up. So what I want to say, mostly the point is that I know that there's all the ways that the pressures of following the way things had been, right? And the world's changed, and trying to get everyone to go back to what it was when the world is not different is causing a lot of the breakdowns in emotional and mental health that are leading to intense bullying, increased suicides, all the challenges the youth are feeling. With all the research, a lot of it points to the fact that nobody paused. Nobody said, let's stop and listen to the kids. And I think it can't be an optional thing. It can't be like an assembly that they can opt out of. It can't be that it's left to some teachers to just be the lone people. I think that the best way to solve problems and to show the country, our community, and our kids is to show that there's something visibly different about how we're going to approach solving the problem and making them feel safe. So thank you very much. I will email the rest of my statements.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Raviv Turner, who's been given 2 minutes by Ari Kazatker.
Good evening. My name is Raviv Turner. I'm a freshman at Fairview High. Last Wednesday, when the news broke, he called me midday to come pick him up from school, saying he feels unsafe. Our kids feel unsafe at school. I know you will hear from other parents tonight about other safety concerns they have, and it is imperative that we address them all. But I'm here tonight for one concern and one concern only. Stop the next active shooting from happening. And I'm deeply sad to say it, but it's a matter of when, not if, till the next active shooting takes place at BVSD. In 1999, it was Columbine. In 2019, it was STEM School at Highland Ranch. In 2021, it was King Super, just 1 mile south of Fairview High. The writing is on the wall. Esteban Egan is just one miserable young man. There is an entire background story on what pushed him to make those threats, which I won't get into due to limited speaking time. I'm also a former Israeli, ex-military and a security advisor. Unfortunately, in Israel, the playbook on how to protect schools from active shooting was written in blood. This playbook includes one key element: armed and trained security that can respond in seconds, not minutes, and neutralize an active shooter with minimum casualties. Last Wednesday, I asked Ms. Charlotte Chopin, the principal at Fairview High, and Mr. Brandon Sullivan, the director of security at BVSD, where is the armed security at Fairview High? Where is the police? They said that the BVSD board removed them last year. I then learned that in a controversial decision back in the end of last year, the board removed the school resources officers from our school due to, and I quote, an unproportionately higher summons rate to people of color. By the way, I don't like this term at all. I think it's patronizing. In fact, after the last Wednesday event, I talked to other parents, some of them people of colors, they're called in their report. Guess what? They also want armed security back at school. I'm also a data analyst, so I studied the report and supporting data, and let me tell you something. The data is marginal and anecdotal at best. No statistical significance. The same report also states that we generally lack individual student information about tickets and summons, so can't match student demographics. It also states that the staff initiated 72% of the calls to SROs. I ask the board, please do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. If there are specific issues with SROs, train them, work with them, or get a private security firm to secure our schools instead. Only yesterday, we got a harsh reminder from an active shooting in school in St. Louis, Missouri, where an officer responded in minutes and killed the shooter. According to a recent report and analysis by the U.S. Secret Service of targeted school violence that studied 41 incidents, SROs and law enforcement at the fastest response time of 1 minute or less, fast response time saves lives. And talking about statistical significance, as of this afternoon, we have over 1,200 signatures of concerned BVSD parents that signed a petition to increase police presence in schools. Honestly, I couldn't care less if it is SROs that you bring back or private armed security. We want to see armed presence at our schools all day, every day, not empty parked police cars like in the last few days at Fairview High. We also have quotes from reputable security firms that already secure educational institutions around town. The cost is pretty much comparable to SROs. And a word to the board. It is your fiduciary duty to protect our kids. This is what you've been voted for. I would like for each member to go on record about the topic of armed police security at schools so we know how to vote for the board next year. I hope to see armed police security at schools, not in few weeks or months, but this week. Otherwise, the next active shooting that takes place at BVSD, the blood would be on the hands of the board members that voted to remove law enforcement from school. And here is a quote by John Stuart Mill: "Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than the good men should look on and do nothing." Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Terry, I'm going to butcher this name, Burnsick, who's been given 2 minutes by Danielle Diamond. And I apologize for messing up your name.
That's all right. Everybody does. Hi, my name is Terry Burnchich, and I have 2 children at Boulder High School. We are all aware of the numerous safety concerns that have been raised regarding our public spaces, and more specifically around Boulder High School. I'm speaking today to ask that the board work with the city to implement enhanced safety protocols for our schools. We'd like to see the following 3 actions. Number 1, we need to enforce a 1,000-foot square safety zone around our schools with 0 tolerance for criminal activity within that perimeter. We're not asking for new laws here, just consistent and timely enforcement of the laws that are already on the books. We need increased policing in the safety zones with the aim of deterring these criminals from setting up camp in the first place. Within the safety zone, tents should not be permitted and drug offenses should be punished to the fullest extent. Creating a safety zone around BHS is even more critical because it's an open campus. Kids come and go throughout the day. If BVSD and the city are aware of nearby safety threats, even if they aren't on the BHS campus, they need to take the appropriate actions to mitigate them. For example, as you heard, the Creek Kids are a well-known group of BHS students that walk across the bike path to do drugs every day. They have unfettered access to drugs being sold by adults within steps of BHS. In an attempt to prevent our children from accessing marijuana and alcohol, state law requires that dispensaries be at least 1,000 feet from a school and liquor sales at least 500 feet away. And enforcement actions are swift if an establishment is found to be selling to minors. And yet, while there are state drug-free zone laws that dictate enhanced penalties for drug crimes committed within 1,000 feet of a school or a park, the city has taken no concrete steps to permanently dismantle or investigate a known drug haven within feet of Boulder High School. In fact, they seem to be encouraging it by installing a needle disposal bin right outside the campus. This situation is totally unacceptable. BVSD has an absolute responsibility to intervene given their proximity to the campus and the known threats that exist there, and they need to pressure the city to be part of the solution by enforcing the existing laws that we have put in place to protect our children. The second request we have is that the students need a crime reporting framework so they can register their safety concerns. Some members of City Council and Board are questioning the legitimacy of the safety concerns that we have been raised because they aren't supported by police data. The vast majority of what our students are encountering on a daily basis is not an immediate threat to their physical well-being, but rather an overarching climate of menacing activity. On a daily basis, they're yelled at, harassed, propositioned, and are witnessing all kinds of criminal behavior that no teenager should be exposed to. Anyone with eyes can see that the majority of the encampments around Boulder High School are not populated with vulnerable, unhoused individuals. If they were, the city wouldn't have felt the need to install the needle drops. Since the city has clearly acknowledged that there's an illegal drug problem in this area, why is the onus on our students to report back to them before taking any meaningful action? Shouldn't the city be trying to intervene before the situation escalates into a reportable crime? In order to apply pressure to the city, BVSD needs more data on student safety concerns. We want messaging to go out to students, parents, teachers, and the public that any harassment, violence, drugs, camping, or any other illegal activity be reported to BVSD security immediately. Safe to Tell should be an app on everyone's phone. Let's get every incident on the record. The last thing, which is critical, is that BVSD needs to be meeting with the City Council and Police Department on a regular basis to strategize on the safety issues that concern the school. Principals and teachers should be welcomed into these discussions as the eyes and the ears of our schools. This is a big problem with no easy answers, but it's not acceptable for BVSD to claim that their hands are tied. No more finger pointing, no more silos. All groups need to come to the table with the shared goal of student safety. BVSD has close to 30,000 students under its supervision, and it is the single largest employer in Boulder County. With this amount of reach, you have a responsibility to advocate on behalf of your students, families, and staff. We are telling you that the security situation has become untenable under your watch. You need to demand changes from the city and police department. You have a powerful voice. Please use it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Laraz Bergman-Turner.
Thank you for your time. My name is Liraz Bergman-Turner, and my son is a freshman at Fairview High School. There's a lot of passion, as you have noticed, behind the need for safety and security for our kids. Coming from Israel, my husband and I know what it is to feel unsafe as kids, maybe from different sources of stressors, but we understand and the repercussions of PTSD. We'd like to avoid that with our kids. Mental support for the kids should be addressed at schools now more than ever. How about incorporating alternatives and complementary modalities into our schools? Resiliency training is needed for our kids as well, finding ways to incorporate courage instead of fear into the system, empowerment instead of helplessness. There is a minority of unstable, miserable, sad, hurt, and neglected people that don't have enough resources to deal with their unresolved issues. Our kids need to be protected from them and to be given the resources so they won't become them. Having a professional security company around school is going to give our kids the psychological effect of safety bubble, of security, protection, and support to them, to us, and to the local community. I urge you to reevaluate the decision to remove the SROs or to find a third-party security service company or any other solution for the safety matter, because this is your duty. This is not adding violence if done correctly. This is added protection and exercising prevention. The purpose of the armed guard is just to do their job, protect. My job is to advocate for my kids. Your job, as I see it, is to provide us, the parents, the assurance, and to show us the practice why it was a good idea to have you in charge of all the security of our future is worth.
Thank you. Next, we have Suzanne Stoller.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Stoller, as you just said. I have kids at Flatirons Elementary School and Fairview High School. I am also a member of the District Parents Council, speaking today about the safety of our children, and in particular have a deep concern that the district is not appropriately prepared to handle real threats when they present themselves. I'm advocating for two things: safety and security plans that are best in class. Not just plans, but best in class, and the confidence that these plans can actually be executed effectively. Communications that are clear, decisive, and give us as much information as is appropriate to parents, kids, faculty, and staff. Based on what we experienced last week at Fairview, it's clear we are missing the mark on both. Ironically, a couple of weeks ago, the DPC heard from the district's Director of Safety and Security. He presented the district's plan and approach to keeping our schools safe. He explained how iterative this process is and how it gets better and better, and that every school knew how to execute on that plan. It was striking as a parent to have heard that presentation just 1 week before the Fairview High School incident happened, and then to experience that incident. It left me with very little confidence that there is actually a plan. Though I do have confidence that there was an effective response that the superintendent referenced, from the Safe to Tell report to the Boulder Police, and possibly even our school. What our community experienced as parents and as staff and faculty and students was nothing short of total chaos. Chaos does not breed any confidence that this district or the school has command over situations like this. We have to do better. Let's start with the lowest hanging fruit and make our communications to our full community clear and timely. Make sure those communications match the perceived threat. To not have clear communications when something like this happens is at best unnerving, and at worst it is the difference between life and death. This includes silly things like ensuring intercom systems. Oops, do I have to go? Sorry. I'll take 10 more seconds.
You can finish and then send us an email.
Okay.
So go ahead.
All
I'm
right.
not going to cut you off in the middle
We
of a
also need to
sentence.
make sure we actually have best-in-class plans that we can execute on, and I'd like to know that the board is actually willing to invest energy in not only having plans, but making sure they are best in class. This community, as you have heard, will take things into their own hands if we do not do so. I'm asking the board to figure this out. You have parents like all of us that are here today, and those that are on the call that are actually willing to help you. So please take us up on it, help us help you, but we have to take action now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ann Hill.
Good evening. My name is Ann Michelle Hill. I have two parents at Fairview, and I share the commitment and desire of all these parents who want to keep our children and communities safe. There is always room for improvement. However, I come here tonight to celebrate what worked. A threat went out on social media and circulated throughout the high school. Thankfully, someone remembered Safe to Tell and anonymously reported the threat to law enforcement. To me, that person is a hero. They thwarted what could have been a terrible, life-changing outcome. Law enforcement reacted, and the threatening individual did not ever make it to campus. The system to keep danger at bay worked. I've heard students call Safe to Tell a joke. I think we need to invest in raising integrity and awareness of the program. At freshman orientation, every student should be encouraged to put Safe to Tell on their phone. This incident should be the poster child for the program. Another smart investment is public education regarding secure storage of firearms. Adults must be aware they are required by law to secure their weapons so their teens do not have access. The parents that are here tonight to promote armed security as a solution have no credible data that supports it would lessen gun violence on campuses. In fact, data shows more deaths occur on school grounds when an SRO is present. Many school shooters are actively suicidal, intending to die in the act. So an armed officer may be an incentive rather than a deterrent. Whenever firearms are present, there's room for error, and even highly trained officers get split-second decisions wrong. The shooting at the STEM school in Highlands Ranch had an SRO who actually fired at police during the chaos. What we need is the entire community to be vigilant and aware of the signs of unstable, violent individuals and use the tools such as Safe to Tell to divert violence and prevent strategies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Megan Voss. Is Megan here?
Hi, I'm
Virtual,
online.
sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
That's
go
okay.
ahead.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm joining you as a Boulder resident, a member of the Moms Demand Action leadership team, an educator, and a mom of 2 Bear Creek elementary students. When I started my current job at Bear Creek in August, one of the first things I felt was gratitude that the closet in my room would fit all of the students in my small groups if we needed to hide from a shooter. We do not have to live this way. After yesterday's shooting in St. Louis and the threat at Fairview last week, we are all thinking about how to best keep our children safe. When emotions are high, it's important to base our actions on best practices and research, such as those compiled by the gun violence prevention organization, Everytown for Gun Safety. Research tells us that the vast majority of shooters have a connection to the school and are often students. Guns that are used on school grounds usually come from the home of the shooter or the home of their family or friends. Shooters often exhibit warning signs of potential violence, either through their behavior or by telling someone about their plans. Our approach to preventing school shootings needs to account for these key findings. Our schools must establish threat assessment programs to understand and to intervene when students are at risk to themselves or to others. Furthermore, we need to ensure that students who are at risk of harming themselves or others do not have access to guns. Please do not implement practices that will increase harm, such as increasing the presence of armed officers. We all want our children to be safe, and I appreciate all of your hard work. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Vanda Sinha, who's also virtual or remote.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
My name is Vandana Sinha. I'm an educator, and I am the parent of 2 children, one freshman at Fairview, one just next door at Southern Hills. And I'm here today just to reinforce the message that there is a strong, I believe, majority of parents who are opposed to the militarization of our school in a knee-jerk way. Like Megan Voss, who spoke before me, I think that it's very important that we take a careful, thoughtful, research-based approach to dealing with issues. And I want to separate 3 different issues that I think we're dealing with here. Number one is the question of safety. And there is a lot of research on that. We need to think about our approach to assessing and dealing with threats, and to do that carefully, and thoughtfully and make sure things are implemented. The second is the question of communications around threats. And we saw, as Superintendent Anderson has said, failures in that system of communication at Fairview. But the third is the communication after the threat. And I think we've seen really important failures there as well. I'd just like to thank Superintendent Anderson by starting with an apology and an acknowledgement of failure. I think that's the first time that many of us have heard that. I don't think that message has gone out to the school community as a whole. And I think the defensive response and the repetition of the message that protocol was followed undermines people's trust in the ability of the school and the school district to address this issue. I will yield the rest of my time to other parents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Katie Farnan, who is also virtual or remote.
Thank you. So I am a parent of 2 students in BVSD, and I am here because I followed this discussion in 2020, and I fully support the 2020 recommendations of both the District Accountability Committee and the Equity Council with regard to removing SROs from BVSD. That was based on research, that was based on data from the Colorado Department of Education that showed that students of color were being referred to law enforcement in BVSD at 2 to 3 times the rate of their white classmates. We must continue making decisions based on data. I understand the fear for the safety of our children and my children, but we cannot sacrifice the safety of the entire student body in this process. We have all seen that data. So I'm also hoping the board can help make outreach to the public at large on some of the important facts about police presence in schools. Schools with SROs don't have SROs roaming the hallway every day in every school. And I say that because it's important for us to understand that there is a rapid response plan and there's always coordination. And that is where we can focus our efforts. The school always works with public agencies to provide a rapid response to protect the health and safety of students. But there is just a lot of evidence that the presence of law enforcement in schools leads to greater involvement with the criminal justice system, and those interactions have lasting impacts on students. So I hope you can continue to make your decisions based on good evidence about school safety and make sure that we're thinking about the protection of all students in schools. Thank you.
Next, we have Mark Cathcart.
Good evening. I'm Mark Cathcart. I live in Louisville, Colorado. I'm the father of a Monarch High School freshman whose only schools have been in BVSD. So I'd like to thank you for your service. It's my first time before you tonight. A few weeks ago, I considered signing up to speak about transit and air quality and the mess that is leaving Monarch High School in the afternoons. I had some suggestions. When I found out that the board only had 2-minute speaking slots, I decided it was pointless to try to get across a complex issue in that amount of time. I find myself here tonight, though, on a much more problematic issue, but with a much simpler message to the board. As a parent, I'm horrified by the idea that any physical harm could come to my daughter, much less her death. I hear the other parents here tonight and would remind you that you do represent the district, not just Boulder and its problems. Notwithstanding last week's events at Fairview, I have to say I simply don't agree that there is a need for BVSD to return to having armed officers in schools. Many horrendous school atrocities we've seen don't help. There has also been a problem with overreach by school resource officers. Please do not put armed officers back in Boulder Valley's schools. There are many, many other persistent problems that you could spend money on that would be a better use of tax dollars compared to the actual risk. Thank you for your time. Good evening.
Next we have, thank you. Next we have David Sue.
Hello, my name is David Shu. I'm here to talk about something less charged than what everyone else is talking about. First, I'd like to thank you for your service. I think being a school board member is a very difficult position right now, almost as difficult as public school teacher. Whatever you decide with school resource officers and security, one thing is certain, you're not going to put it on a consent agenda and have no public input on that topic. But what I'm talking about is the decision to allow the City of Boulder to build a modular home factory on BVSD property next to residential areas. That was put on the consent agenda on August 23rd. It had no input on it. I'm a former planning commissioner for the City of Louisville. I'm a current planning commissioner for the County of Boulder, although I'm here in my individual capacity. It's a noble goal to have more affordable housing, so I understand the point of having a modular home factory. However, with any decision, community input and also explanation of the process is helpful to reach a better goal. The factory is going to be in a residential area. The BVSD, or the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan, and the City of Boulder do not allow manufacturing in a public zone. And yet, the annexation agreement that BVSD agreed to simply says that manufacturing is allowed. This is something that neighbors are concerned about. It would be nice if we had a seat at the table, or at least we could stand in the back of the room while you guys, with the city, decide how best to address this modular home factory. So I ask that you involve the community in that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Amy Riley, virtual or remote, please.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. So I am calling in tonight and speaking on behalf of my daughter, Tessa Riley, who was one of the targeted victims of the events on last Wednesday. I also have a guardian who lives with us who is also targeted. I also have another senior. So I have 3 seniors at Fairview. I have 1 in your transitions program, and I have a freshman at Boulder High. So I've been around for a long time, and I'm happy to be speaking with you tonight on behalf of Tessa. And this is what she had to say. Hello, everyone. My name is Tessa Riley. I'm a senior at Fairview High School. I was one of the 9 victims included in the threat. I wanted to speak to you all today about how Fairview handled the situation. First of all, on Wednesday, I went into school and was immediately stopped by security and police officers, informing me that I was safe, but it was my choice whether to stay or leave school. The severity of the threat hadn't hit me yet. On Monday, when I went in to talk with the school in person, they continued to say that they did not think that school was at risk, when in reality, my presence, along with the other 8 targets, was a huge risk to the school and the student body. I think that all of the drama could have been avoided with a simple call in the morning, letting us know that they were aware of an Instagram post and threats to us. The police had been notified, but the police and Fairview could have had it under control. There should have been a plan. We should have been prepared for a situation like this. And most of all, students should feel safe at their school, especially with a new principal. But we did not at that moment, and not that whole day. I wish Dr. Chopin could have taken more of a leadership role on Wednesday. No one wants this to happen, and no one likes to think that a situation like this would happen to them, but it did, and it was handled poorly. I understand the thinking that contacting the entire school might cause a panic or interfere with the investigation, but a simple conversation with 9 students, letting them know to stay home, would have been the right thing to do, and the chaos and fear that happened on Wednesday wouldn't happen. At the end of the day, we need communication for good and bad things at school and plan for future problems that hopefully won't happen. In conclusion, I don't believe in guns in school. I think they do more harm than good. Just as in St. Louis, when 2 people were killed and 6 were injured, even though they had 7 security officers and metal detectors. I do not have the answers, but more emphasis on mental health is what we should focus on. We can't stop what might happen, but we can be prepared for it. Tessa Riley. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Darren O'Connor, virtual or remote as well.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, there's kind of an echo or talking in the background.
Yeah, got that dealt with. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Darren O'Connor. I live in Lafayette. I'm a practicing lawyer and father to a BVSD high school student. I'm also the chair of the NAACP Boulder County Branch Criminal Justice Committee. And as a father, I understand and live with the fear of a school shooting. And I have done a lot of research into the risks and benefits of having SROs in schools. As much as it seems like having police in schools would make our children safer, it sadly is simply not the case. From the Uvalde shooting to the high school shooting in Parkland, Florida, and sadly so many more, we have evidence that law enforcement officers present at schools when a shooter decides to endanger the lives of our children simply do not stop such violence. Given the lack of benefit, the unintended consequences of SRO presence in schools must then be given more weight than it already deserves. That consequence is what is known as the school-to-prison pipeline, as well as disparate punishment of students of color. This board recently engaged in a thoughtful review of its policies on SROs and decided to remove them from Boulder Valley schools. In their place, BVSD is using school safety advocates. One of the first was a former Boulder police officer. Though my understanding is there may very well still be disparate disciplinary outcomes for our Black and brown children in Boulder schools, which absolutely still needs addressed, moving away from the risk of armed policemen in schools was the right thing to do. In the most recent threat of a shooting at a school here in Boulder, the police arrived in minutes after being alerted to the danger. This is the appropriate response to such threats. The fear that leads parents to want these officers entangled in our children's education, though understandable, is not a rational one. Uvalde tells us this, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High tells us this. Please keep SROs out of our schools and continue relying on the police as necessary. It's working. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ryan Harwood, again virtual.
He's not on.
All right, we'll come back and see if he gets on by the time we conclude. So next we'll move on to Silas Atkins. Virtual again.
Hello, thank you for everything that everybody is doing. I am here to speak to what has been mentioned by several other folks around wanting to keep SROs out of schools and find the best possible methods to keep kids safe. I have a student at New Vista High School. I have a student at Manhattan Middle School, and I work at Manhattan Middle School. And I can say patently that my personal safety does not feel better when there are more guns around. I urge that the data and research that has happened already be continued to be reviewed, updated, and kept current to make sure we're making the best decision and that we keep on down this path of ensuring our students' safety with the best possible methods. I also recognize those that have spoken and the fear and trauma that has come up. And I want to make sure that we continue to look at mental health supports and other things that can help our students. I know that my children would benefit from it as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Emily McCullen, virtual.
I don't see her on my list.
All right, we'll come back again to Emily at the end, see if she comes on. Next, we have Tina Pittman-Wagers. Tina, hold on a second because we can't hear you. Let's get the microphone.
Oops.
So you can start over.
Oh, I get to start over. I'm Tina Pittman-Wagers, retired teaching professor, clinical psychologist, and parent of 2 Fairview graduates. I want to address the issue of SROs and other measures inside schools which can help keep our schools safe. For important questions of physical and emotional safety of our children, I hope that whatever solutions BVSD employs are informed by research. Several folks have already spoken to this, but one of the arguments we keep going back to is the idea that more guns will make us safer. But as we've seen in several instances recently, including Uvalde, with more guns, even in the hands of well-trained and well-intentioned professionals, often don't make a difference. In an ambitious 20-year study examining the effects of school resource officers in 179 school shootings, the presence of SROs did not make a difference in preventing deaths or injuries. And other people have already mentioned this too, but SROs might also create an atmosphere where students are more likely to be criminalized, and that students of color particularly suffer from those consequences. What we do know is that almost always someone knows about a student's potential for violence. A parent, a friend, a classmate, a counselor, a teacher, as others have suggested, Safe to Tell should be on everyone's phone. And we should increase awareness of this resource. Threat assessment programs that are integrated into the school environment can go a long way towards identifying and de-escalating the threat of violence before it becomes a reality. Security upgrades in school buildings, along with plans that staff can implement, can help keep a school safe without making it feel like a prison. Certainly, in the larger community, we need to continue to work on legislative measures to prevent access to guns by folks who are underage, who are in crisis, or who are planning violence. Those are some facts grounded in research that can help guide our future school environments. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, we have Dan Williams, virtual.
Hi, good evening. My name's Dan Williams. I'm a lawyer here in Boulder, and most important, I'm the father of 2 recent graduates from Boulder High School. I'm here first to thank you as a board for being so thoughtful and so evidence-based in your decision-making. It's making a huge difference for our community. Now, taking that thoughtful, evidence-based approach can be really hard, and it can be particularly hard in times like this, after the King Super shooting, after the event at Fairview last week. But you looked and studied the issue carefully about what to do with SROs, and you made the right decision. I mean, we've heard earlier tonight that SROs don't actually make our students safer. We've heard tonight that SROs disproportionately harm minority students. And there's another thing that SROs do, which is essentially criminalize behavior that should be handled through a normal student disciplinary system. And my own son was a victim of that. I mean, my own son threw a magic marker in class, something he shouldn't have done. And that should be a routine student disciplinary matter. And instead, he was threatened with criminal prosecution by the SRO at Boulder High School. And, you know, he likely could have been charged, but I intervened as a lawyer immediately and stopped that from happening. Your evidence-based decision to say, no, these types of matters should be handled as school disciplinary matters instead of police actions was right. And I'm urging you to stand firm. I will say, as a parent, I get the fear that you're hearing from other parents tonight. The fear that my student is walking along Boulder Creek path, the fear that my student could be subject to a school shooting. And those are horrible realities that parents have to deal with. But the reality is, the police chief said just 2 weeks ago that crime's actually down in Boulder. I myself bike across Boulder Creek Path frequently, and you know, it's generally safe. And that's not to say there are never problems, but the reality is we have a safe community. You're doing things right, and I just want to thank you and ask you to stay the course.
Thank you. Next, we have Sharon James, who's been given 2 minutes by Lisa Boltz. It's not on yet. You'll have a red light when it's on. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to talk tonight. I think I'm going to beat this watch for 2 minutes. So, first of all, my name is Sharon James. I have 5 kids, 4 of them at the BVSD. 1 of them is graduated already. So I have a lot of exposures in the school system. I'm one of the very concerned parents here in light of what's happening with the threats and the violence and around the school. I personally see a lot more crime. I hear a lot more crime. I see them at school. I would like to have a solution for all these threats, whether it will be a police or a private security firm. I don't have a particular preference, but we must have a solution that we all agree on. Security can help reduce kids' and parents' anxiety. I personally believe security should be multi-layered with the kids to be successful. So just an example, when we're putting security in school, we have to include the children themselves to meet these guys, not just letting them patrol in the school. I think the kids should be involved. This will lessen the intimidation that students might feel. Also, children are more familiar with who belongs to the school and who doesn't, which can help the security of the school. So I totally believe in this integration, and security is for everyone. It is time to take the next step to bring the SRO or any security to be back to school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Samara Tostado.
I gave away my 2 minutes.
Okay. So then next, we have Kristen Livesey, who is in person, who has 2 minutes from David Livesey, or Livesey. I'm probably saying it wrong.
Okay, the 2 minutes need to be delegated before the meeting starts.
You actually had an extra 2 minutes, Sharon, but that's all right.
Yeah, Sharon
We're
had
never
4
upset if-
minutes.
You had 4 minutes, but it's fine.
Samara, are you
So-
speaking?
So we're all good.
Okay.
So I
Samara's
think
not-
now we're going to go with Kristen, who has
Hi.
4 minutes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kristen Livesey. I'm a parent of a BVSD high school student. These are the texts I received from my daughter while she was at school on October 13th. Mom, we had a meeting about what happened, and what I said was used against me. I also feel like nobody was on my side. I was told to go to the counseling office because I started crying again. They also wanted me to switch my 4th and 5th period classes. I feel like I was being traumatized all over again. The day before, my daughter was bullied by 2 girls. She reported it to her teacher, asking for help, stating that she felt personally attacked and disrespected. My daughter is in 2 protected classes, one among several disabilities. She has high-functioning autism, and she's on an IEP. And yes, it's rather obvious. The second protected class falls under sexual orientation. The next morning, my daughter confided in a para she had worked with in previous years about everything what happened. She told the para she did not believe that the situation was handled correctly. Later that day, during class time, the teacher called a surprise meeting that included my daughter, the 2 girls that bullied her, and the para, and the teacher herself. During the meeting, the teacher retaliated. My daughter was told to switch her schedule, including sending the 2 bullies to go with her to get this arranged. The 2 girls were not asked, the 2 other girls were not asked to change their classes. At the end of the meeting, the teacher asked my daughter, "Do you want to retract your statement that I didn't handle this correctly?" This was a surprise to my daughter because she had not told this to the teacher. She had only told the para. My daughter answered yes because she felt intimidated. The meeting, excuse me, imbalance of power played into these events. The meeting with no one supporting my daughter, who was clearly outnumbered. 2 bullies versus my daughter, who has disabilities. Harassment related to sexual orientation. The surprise of finding out the teacher knew and used against her what my daughter had told the para in confidence. Unilateral decisions in the moment to punish my daughter and not the bullies. My daughter has not attended class since this occurred, and for her safety and emotional well-being, she will not attend yet. In addition, the teacher brought a union rep to an emergency IEP meeting that we called because the teacher said she needed support. We realized after the meeting the union rep was actually my daughter's special ed teacher. We believe the staff knew this, and no one at the meeting identified this as a conflict of interest. My daughter's extremely upset and anxious about being punished over reporting bullying. She is so stressed over the situation and often cries and asks what's going to happen. She fears the bullies and the teacher. She no longer trusts the para. She fears she will be called into another meeting by the staff, the school staff, with no one on her side. She's worried about how she will attend class, get caught up, and complete the certificate she was working on in that class. She worries the teacher will retaliate on other children in the school. She does not think it's fair that she cannot go to class, but the bullies can. She does not understand why she's the one being punished, not the bullies. I'm concerned that Broomfield High School and other schools' training does not cover how to recognize bullying and doesn't cover how to follow applicable policy. And BBSD policy is not current with Jack and Kate's law. I'm concerned about the culture to protect bullies and punish the kids reporting bullying, including by staff members. The school not protecting bullied students. And the negligent actions by a teacher made the situation worse by choosing not to support my child, but instead retaliate. I'm concerned about the impact this has had on my daughter's mental health, which we've heard about earlier from others. This can't stop here. What is BBSD and Broomfield High School going to do to address not only my daughter's specific situation, but to also change the culture and improve so all kids feel safe reporting bullying and not fearing staff retaliation? That's all.
Just waiting till, so it's not distracting, just waiting till the other people leave behind you. So yeah, you're next. Next we have Yael Cohen.
Hi, I'm Yael Cohen. I've been here in the past supporting other students with disabilities like Kristen's, who spoke to the board and asked why she had to stay home to be safe while her bullies got to go to school. It was not handled well by the school or the district at that time, and finally the family moved out of the district to save the student's life. I was pleased to see that the bullying policy was updated in 2020, and it is so much better than it used to be, but it's outdated. Jack and Kate were two of Colorado's teenagers who died by suicide following getting bullied by school. Jack and Kate's law was passed by the Colorado legislature in 2021. In February of 2022, CDE, in conjunction with the law, came out with a model bullying policy, and all the school districts were directed to make their own policies consistent with it. In response to my Cora request last week, the district wrote, "I heard back from our legal counsel, and she confirmed that she had reviewed the Colorado Bullying Prevention and Education Best Practices and Model Policy, and while our policy was updated prior to the date you mentioned, it was done with the same proximity. As a result, it does meet the intent, and in some cases actually carries material from the documents verbatim." One of the experts who helped write the CDE model policy sent you all an email this evening. It explains where the district is not yet compliant with the law. It's not just about timing. BVSD's policy doesn't incorporate the reporting and investigation sections of CDE's reporting standards with regard to the conflict and bullying, and with asking the reporter about perceived imbalance of power. The parents should not have to search for these, as Kristen had to. By failing to update BVSD's bullying policy with the states, the district is out of compliance and in violation of Jack and Kate's law. We're asking you tonight, as a district and as a board, to please update the policy. It's fairly simple, to include the missing components of the state model policy per Colorado law. Please also include in it how often staff training must take place. Don't wait. I know you don't want another bullied student suicide on your watch. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Christian Kerr remotely or virtual.
I'm actually here.
Oh, you're here. Okay, that works.
Hi, board. Thank you for having me. There's a good amount of trust in the Boulder community. Historically, there has been. There's trust for our institutions and our elected officials. And a lot of it exists because of the shared values that between the community and our representatives. So, one hopes that when policy drifts into kind of more political realms, Boulder's a political place, that there would be this trust, and there would be also transparency and accountability. For example, when things aren't going as they should. So I recently learned that one of our elected school board members is suing us, the citizens of the city of Boulder, our law enforcement. And this lawsuit is in order to prevent the enforcement of laws around throughout the entire community, but particularly around our schools. Forgot to mention I'm a father of two, and my kids, they see it. I mean, I don't know how a lot of people claim to not, but they know what, like, they feel danger when there's like shady people doing shady things with half the neighbors' bikes in tents. The lawsuit really crosses the line for me. I know it's not the board's position as a whole, but it's part of what's going on. I think putting the demands of advocacy groups above the safety of our kids is a mistake, and I think the kids and the community's safety needs to be of top concern.
Thank you. Next, we have Kristen Eller, virtual.
She's
Nope.
not on,
She's
nor
not
is the
on?
last one.
Nor is the last one?
Correct.
Haley Goodstein. Then did we,
They did not show up either.
they did not show up, so we didn't hear from the other two who didn't show up. All right, then, did we get everyone, Laura?
Yes, we did.
All right. This brings us to the end of our public participation. We really appreciate hearing from all of our speakers this evening. And this leaves us to board communication. Board, I'd like to do board communication since everyone is still here, and then maybe take a break after that, if everyone's all right with that. All right, so who wants to go first with board communication? Nicole?
I wanted to say thank you to everyone that took the time to show up tonight to share your experiences. And I also wanted to acknowledge everybody that contacted us online. I know it is our procedure for Board President Gebhardt to respond to those emails, but I do read them all, and I do take those thoughts into consideration as well. I also want to say thank you to our Boulder High students, in particular, that presented tonight. It is impressive to witness on a regular basis what our students are capable of. So kudos to the district for that. I wanted to say school safety in all of its facets, physical, psychological, emotional, are of critical importance. And that while it's evident that we're not in 100% consensus on this, I think there are things we can clearly agree on. First, words matter. Second, mental health is paramount. And third, safety is a community issue. And so with that, I welcome opportunities to improve our dialogue and work with community members and state and local agencies to really make sure all of us feel safe in our school environments.
Who wants to go? You want to go next, Beth? Okay.
I just want to start by thanking all of tonight's speakers and our students for coming in. I also really want to validate your voices tonight. We heard you and we really appreciate that. You know, we've spoken a lot tonight about the topic of safety. It's certainly my core belief that everyone deserves to feel safe. And I believe it's very nuanced. What makes me feel safe may not make my neighbor feel safe. It's a complicated problem. But regardless of the proposed solutions tonight, from tonight's speakers, I am so glad that you feel engaged on this particular issue. I share your urgency for a greater sense of safety for all of our students and all of our staff. I appreciate you taking time to talk tonight. And I think one of the refrains that I heard over and over again is that this conversation needs to be moved to a collaborative space. One speaker said, let's remove the silos. Let's get us talking. We need to look at how we can better partner with our city. I think that's an action step we can make, to Nicole's point. I appreciate the suggestion to have regular meetings with our city council and try to move this work forward. Thank you.
Katie, do you have anything?
Not yet.
Not yet? I'll go ahead. Richard?
I do want to thank all the speakers that came in tonight, and I do appreciate their concerns and their comments, etc. But I also want to commend our school district because I think we do have a good safety plan in place for our schools and our students. And I want to thank Kristen and Yale Cohen for their words tonight, and especially around bullying, and look at furthering and looking back at our bullying policy and see how well we can improve that so that we don't have Kristen's daughter going through that process that she went through. And I also want to thank the Boulder High School students. I thought that was a great presentation tonight. And Latinos in Action, that's pretty good, Boulder High School. And that's it.
All right, Stacy?
I'll just echo what my colleagues have said. We thank all of you for coming. We do hear you. We do see you. We read all of the emails. We've received many in the past couple days on both sides of the issue. Just so you know that we do hear what you're saying. And I also wanted to thank the Latinos in Action students and the program. That sounds really exciting.
look forward to seeing where that goes. I was going to say a few things about CASB, but I think I'm going to. Should I? Kitty, Kathy, and I had the opportunity to be at the CASB Fall Conference and Delegate Assembly last week, and a shout out to our very own Kathleen Sullivan, who gave a great presentation about open meetings and core requests, and that was really helpful to me, so thank you. All of the BVSD resolutions passed. There were some very interesting conversations about some of the other resolutions. In particular, the one about climate change did not pass for the first time ever, I think, right? It's been on the books in the past, and it's, okay, that one didn't pass. And the one for FF, which is the free lunch, did pass, but there were about 25 delegates who voted against it. So I just think it's interesting. Happy to explain more. I'm sure Kitty can explain more, and Kathy, but if you want more information, but thought I would report on that.
Kitty, are you ready?
I want to thank everybody who spoke tonight, everybody who emailed us, and I want to start with talking about the Latinos in Action students. It's wonderful now that we are having student moments at most of our meetings, and it's great to see what they're doing. And, you know, for kids to come and speak to us, that's a lot of bravery, I guess, is what I mean to say. I also want to talk about Minna Most's presentation on her surveys on sex education. She sent us a 50-page or 49-page slide deck. This was well thought out research that she did, and she acknowledged that it is not necessarily statistically significant. But one of the things she talked about a couple of times in her emails, but also in her presentation, was about us teaching kids to resist pressure. But one thing I've never heard about is, are we teaching kids to learn not to pressure? Because we shouldn't just be putting responsibility on people to resist being pressured. We need to put responsibility on people to not pressure other people for sexual, behavior. And for the parents who are so scared and were so traumatized, I've never felt that level of fear for my own children, but I have felt fear. And even though the threat never even came close to physically being there, you all didn't know that. And so I really do look forward to a way we're going to improve that kind of communication, because we know we didn't do it exactly right. And some of the emails we've heard from parents whose kids were, too scared to go to school and just so traumatized. And I am sorry that all of this happened, and just want to acknowledge you all.
Lisa?
Yeah. I appreciate everyone who spoke tonight and who emailed us. And Rob, I appreciate you starting with the communication discussion. I think we all agree that communication that is accurate and swift is our goal. I also appreciate the number of folks who called tonight to speak about evidence and evidence-based security decisions. I'm incredibly proud of the decision we made to remove SROs from BVSD. The decision was made after a comprehensive community engagement process. And as we heard from many speakers tonight, guns don't make our kids safer, and regular police presence puts our most vulnerable students at risk. In its place, our school safety advocate program has been doing incredible work. It's a model for best practices across the nation, and I'm just incredibly proud of what we've done. I also take a minute to say that I'm incredibly proud of the ACLU suit that I'm a part of. The ACLU suit specifically addresses the cruelty of enforcing a blanket ban. Currently, the law states that a person cannot even cover themselves with a blanket when sleeping outdoors at night. That's true even in sub-zero temperatures. It's true even when the shelter beds are closed. It is illegal to sleep with a blanket outdoors. The ACLU suit seeks to make sure that this cannot be enforced unless and until there are enough beds for everyone. Unless everybody has a place to go, we cannot force a person to choose between death or violating the law. We're criminalizing existence in poverty with laws like these, and we can't police people into housing, and we can't police them out of poverty. All we can do is police them further and further into trauma. Unhoused service providers have presented to City Council on many occasions a holistic approach to what it would take to work with homelessness from top down across the city. That includes day shelters, night shelters, more transitional housing, more permanently supportive housing, more substance centers, more safe use sites, more mental health centers, safe camping, safe parking. And all of this has been requested, but instead we've spent money on more police, which again is just not solving the problem. I appreciate what everyone is saying. Nobody wants to have folks sleeping outdoors. I don't, the ACLU doesn't, that's not anybody's goal. The problem is that policing people who have no place to go and telling them they literally can't use a blanket to save their lives. I can't support that. So I'm proud of the ACLU suit, I'm proud of our SRO work, and I appreciate you all coming tonight.
No, sorry. So, generally, we don't address specific comments from the public from the board table. We kind of address it generally, but we did take notes. We have your emails, and if you want to send us more emails with your specific, I tried to take notes. I saw some of my other fellow board members taking notes, so if you want to send those requests, we can certainly coordinate those requests to our superintendent, which is kind of how we handle those. Just so you know, we're not ignoring them. It's just that it's been our practice generally not to take specific requests from the public and address them from the board table. So it's not disrespectful. I'm just trying to offer you an alternative for sending those requests. So that's generally how we handle that. And so again, we can't take the questions from, we've addressed that question. I've responded. So I'm going to just move on with the public comment here. I would like to explain kind of what Stacy talked about, which is the CASB resolutions. That's how, CASB is the Colorado Association of School Boards, and that is how we govern our legislative agenda going forward. I was really happy to know that our 3 resolutions on charter schools passed with very little criticism, which I thought was awesome.
Can you address board members
And
commenting about people online? I think that would be nice to hear from you as a leader of the board.
so if you can send emails, again, I'm trying to stick with our policy, which is that we don't take specific requests from, but I'm happy to respond if you want to send me emails. So, well, again, if you can send emails, I think that would be a better way to handle this. Well, I got them in the last 2 days, and I apologize, I'm a little behind, and I will respond. So,
Kathy, I'd like to make a motion, we take a recess.
okay, can I just finish what I was going to say really quickly? I also wanted to address the fact that I know that there have been several, we're getting close to an election, and so there have been certain letters and certain things stated by all of us, and I just want the public to understand that the only positions that the board takes are those that we take by resolution and that we have had public conversation about, and those are very limited. So if you see representations from individual board members, the only thing that the board is supporting are the things that we've taken public votes on, and one of those, as you might remember, was FF. We are passing a policy on what we look at, so that the things that we are trying to address as a board are things that affect the entire district or affect the state, and us as part of the state. So I just wanted to make a statement about that. And I also just want to thank you, Rob, for stepping up and talking about the communication strategies and the communication. We can always do better, and I really appreciate your stepping into that and acknowledging the issues that we did, but the issues where we can do better. And we all look forward to working with you and working with our staff and working with the community to improve our safety. I recognize that We are not the city council, we are not the city, but we do work in partnership with them, and I appreciate the request to continue that partnership with the city, and I appreciate the request to work in partnership with the police department, and I think we all take that very seriously, that we have that partnership, and that we need to make sure that all our students are safe. So I hope that addresses that, but I will get back to your emails. I do apologize for not getting back to them in the last 2 days, but I will try to get back to them in the next couple days. So please feel free to continue to send us emails. And I think in Richard's request, if there's anything else that we want to talk about, we'll do it at a later time. So, and I do want to I didn't thank the Boulder High students. I do love having the students come. I think that's why we're all here. I think that it helps center us as to what we're doing. When we see the really good work that's going on in our schools, I want to continue that really good work in our schools. And I really do appreciate all of you taking time out of your very busy lives and your family to come and share your concerns with us, so that we can work in partnership together to make sure all of us are safe. So we'll take a recess now. I'm going to wait till Rob's mouth is completely full and we'll go back to. We're back in session, and Richard Garcia is asked to complete his board communication, and of course that's totally fine. So the floor is yours, Richard.
Thank you very much, Kathy. You know, in the heat of listening and hearing a lot of concerns with all the emotion that was going on, I totally spaced out something that's very, very, very dear to my heart. It was very exciting this weekend. You know, we had the Latino Parent Conference, the Cuspide Conference, at Monarch High School. And I want to give a shout out to the Monarch High School people because they just treated everybody so wonderfully. They had, throughout the 2 days, you know, because the people that registered for the conference registered for the 2 days, there must have been about 200 people there, okay? Plus the fact that they had childcare, and there must have been another 70 or 80 kids there. So it was just a wonderful event, and they talked about a lot of different things. So I just want to give a shout out to the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition for doing that, and also to Boulder Valley School District for hosting the conference at Monarch High School. And thank you very much, Rob, for taking care of that. And it was a well-planned, well-executed family event that we just had at Monarch High School.
Thanks, Richard. It's always awesome to hear the good work that's going on in the school district, so appreciate you sharing that. And thanks for your engagement with that. Anybody else? Last call for board communication. Okay. So now, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you to do the introduction for our restorative practices information item.
Thank you, Board President Gephardt. I'm so excited to have this presentation for the board and for our community. And I think you're going to be incredibly impressed in regards to the work we've done to enhance restorative practices within BVSD. Board members, you've seen as we've presented strategic plan metrics, the massive increase in restorative practices and interventions as in lieu of suspension and other types of disciplinary consequences. And so just really excited about the work we're doing. Very excited for you all to meet Janelle King, who's done a wonderful job. We were able to recruit her last year to help us with this work. But I will stop taking away from the presentation and turn it over to Dr. De La Cruz.
Good evening, President Gephardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. We are really glad to be before the board this evening sharing information about restorative practices in BVSD. As you know, Janelle King, BVSD's Restorative Practices Coordinator, joined our team last October, and she has extensive experience in restorative practices working with youth, educators, and families across diverse environments. Janelle's position in BVSD was created as part of Resolution 2033 to address disproportionate discipline and approaches to student conduct. Tonight, she'll provide the board with detailed information about restorative practices in general, but also specifically our work in BVSD with restorative practices. Restorative practices have many benefits, all of which enhance our efforts toward cultivating a positive and inclusive culture. Some of Janelle's first actions when she joined BVSD were to meet with administrators from every school to build relationships and to get a better understanding of if and how restorative practices were already being implemented in our schools. She's going to share with you tonight the work that she's done since last October and continues to do. Janelle will also provide an overview of restorative practices. She'll share national data and discuss her own data that she's been collecting around restorative practices here in BVSD and that she has facilitated in our schools. She's going to end the presentation by highlighting a toolkit that she's put together for our schools and for families and discuss what else is on the horizon. Next, Janelle is going to share a wealth of information about restorative practices.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Dr. De La Cruz, for that introduction, and thank you, Board, for having me here this evening. It's been an honor and privilege to be in my role here, serving as the Restorative Practices Coordinator for the district, and I feel really honored that I am able to do this work alongside of schools and support in that way. So we've thrown around this term restorative practices a lot, so I just wanted to make sure everyone understands what we mean when we say restorative practices. So it's not another program for schools, but rather a school-wide approach that is all about intentionally building, maintaining, and then repairing relationships after harm has occurred. It includes both proactive or preventative focused processes, as well as responsive or reactive processes. So when talking about responsive restorative processes, rather than focusing on what rule was broken and essentially like what punishment needs to happen, restorative practices focus on repairing harm after conflict or a problem has occurred. Are you okay? I feel really bad. You can just let it out. Oh. Okay. So essentially focusing on the impact or effects of what happened and what can be done to make things right and prevent it from happening again. So let's take a look at the graphic here on the screen. So we can look at restorative practices through a lens of tiers. So tier 1 is universal and school-wide. It's all about creating a restorative school climate. This takes time for sure, but there are practices that support this school-wide approach, including having a restorative and trauma-informed mindset, and using restorative language, proactive circles in the classroom to build and maintain relationships with students, and using restorative questions. Tier 2 there in the middle is all about restorative discipline with some students. So these responses address root causes of the behavior and support accountability to repair harm and make things right. Practices that support Tier 2 include restorative conversations, responsive circles, restorative reflection sheets, and skill-building alternatives to suspension. The last tier is for a fewer number of students and really focuses on restorative reentry, conversations, and restorative justice conference. Practices that support Tier 3 are those that I just mentioned, so really about when a student is returning after a suspension or expulsion. So I wanted to break down a couple restorative practices and processes and what they look and sound like. So a restorative conversation is really just a short conversation between a teacher or administrator and a student, and it really addresses and prevents the behavior from reoccurring. These conversations really just simply use restorative questions. Restorative circles can actually be classified both as proactive or responsive, and in fact, like roughly 20% of circles should be used proactively, and about 20% should be used responsively, and 80% should be used reactive to address conflict or harm. Really focusing on talking about the ways people were impacted by what happened, how we can repair the harm caused, and to come up with solutions to prevent something like that from happening again. Proactive circles are already a part of many teachers' morning routines and are a quick way to have a simple check-in with everyone in the classroom for just a couple minutes to create connection and grounding for the day. Many of you are probably familiar with the term mediation. It's a facilitated conversation amongst two people, two parties to repair harm and restore relationships. And then many of you have probably also heard of restorative justice conferencing or restorative justice conferences. It's a more formal and, again, voluntary process that is used to address more severe harm and bring together responsible and impacted parties and supporters. The purpose, again, is to discuss what happened, ways people were impacted, and what needs to be done to make it right and repair the harm and prevent that from happening again. Whoops. And then during responsive restorative circles, mediations, and restorative justice conferencing, there's always pre-meetings that happen with each individual before pulling these people together. So it's not just like, hey, let's pull all these people together. There's process, there's time. They usually only take about 15 minutes, but the intention is really to just run through the restorative questions that would be asked in the conversation, the larger conversation. And also, the facilitator's also assessing the readiness to pull the students together. And the biggest factor that signals kind of like a green flag to continue forward with that restorative process is if the responsible student is taking some level of accountability for their actions and harm caused. And the actual restorative process, depending on which one you're using, but it typically takes around 45 minutes to maybe 90 minutes, depending on the severity of the harm, just for some context. So when we look at district-wide goals for restorative practices, there are really three main ones that come up. First is around creating consistency and understanding of restorative practices for all staff at school. When I first started, all schools completed a survey that we called an environmental scan that Dr. De La Cruz mentioned earlier to really get a better understanding of what was going on in our schools, how they were using restorative practices. And from there, I've been doing ongoing trainings, professional learning opportunities, and coaching in our schools. The consistency and understanding piece precedes the next goal, which is really all about embedding restorative practices into the entire school climate and culture. It's not just about training a couple people, but it's really about intentionally creating and always working on improving our restorative mindset in school. In fact, it's been said that to fully become a restorative school, it takes about 3 to 5 years, so it takes time to do this. It's also accomplished through continued conversations with all staff, not just admin, also through the development of restorative practices teams in our schools, as well as consistent use of restorative language and practices. And lastly, we must continue to use restorative practices as alternatives to suspension when appropriate. So it's critical to continue training on the importance of following the discipline matrix in our schools to ensure consistency in the usage of these practices for students as a way to address disproportionate discipline. And so when it comes to national findings, there's actually no standardizations nationally around the implementation of restorative practices and how we define and study them. So it makes it a little bit harder for researchers to study the overall effectiveness since states, districts, and even schools vary on how they define restorative practices. And that's part of my role in my job here, as I discussed, is creating consistency and defining how we use these practices in BVSD. But with that being said, there have been studies done across the country that reveal that students with higher levels of exposure to restorative practices evidence smaller racial discipline disparities, decreased harmful behaviors, and reductions in suspensions and expulsions. Restorative practices have led to a 16 to 84% drop in suspensions in studies done across the country, and students and teachers report an increase in connectedness, relationships, and school climate, notably in schools where restorative practices are embedded in the whole school's climate and culture. And school attendance also tends to improve, and as I mentioned earlier, it does take time, roughly 3 to 5 years, to become a fully restorative school. But we can look at value added next door at Denver Public Schools stats. So they did a 6-year mixed method study on the implementation of restorative practices in their district. And it was reported over 6 years that suspension rates were reduced by nearly 47% across the district. Reductions were reported for all racial and ethnic groups, with a 54% drop for Latino students and a 41% drop in suspensions for Black students. And I'd be happy to provide the board with data and findings from those specific studies that I mentioned up there. All right, so when it comes to the timeline, and as Dr. De La Cruz mentioned earlier, when I started in this month last year, I began by just simply doing an environmental scan to really get a better understanding of if and how these processes were being used in our schools. Every school completed a survey to collect this information, and then between November of 2021 through the end of last school year, I went out and I actually facilitated 30 of these restorative processes. So whether it was an RJ conference, a mediation, or a circle, I facilitated 30 in our schools, and I'll break down that data next on what that looks like. I also initiated a short Google form that admin or counselors can fill out if they request support in facilitating some of these processes in their school. Typically, I will facilitate the restorative process if administrators want to see the process in action to refine their skills, or if it involves a more serious incident. And then in December of 2021, I created the Restorative Practices Toolkit. It continuously gets updated. It's shared with everyone at every school, and it includes many different restorative practices, resources, templates, and scripts. And then in April and May of last school year, I trained at least one administrator from every school by level. It's a requirement in all schools that at least one administrator or dean receive this training and serve as the restorative practices point person in their school. And then this summer, I recorded a 90-minute teacher training video that's available in my Passport and Schoology, and it provides an overview of restorative practices for teachers and supportive classroom processes that they can start using. I tried to make it as simple and direct as possible with giving them 3 tools and tips that they can add to their tool belt to use in their classroom. Over 200 teachers so far have watched it. I think there's actually more than that now. And we're continuing to encourage all of our teachers to watch this because we know there's many teachers in the district. And then to kick off this school year, I trained all elementary and secondary counselors as well as the mental health advocates. In continuation from the teacher training video I just mentioned, after teachers have watched that video, if admin wants me to come out and do follow-up training, I've been doing that in many of our schools to kind of meet where their needs are at. Some schools are already having me come out on a regular basis during late start. Having multiple trainings spaced out over the school year is best practice, since this work really cannot be taught in a one-and-done PowerPoint presentation. That's why follow-up trainings, role-playing, or in other words, like skill practice opportunities and facilitation and coaching is critical in this work. As I continue throughout this school year, I'm still going out into schools and facilitating restorative circles, mediations, and restorative justice conferences. But more so this year, I've been doing more coaching for admin. So they'll reach out and say like, hey, I have a question regarding this incident. I want to facilitate this restorative justice conference. Can I run the process past you and see what your thoughts are? Or like, I have a student returning from suspension and I saw there's a restorative reentry conference script. Can we talk through that? The last point I'll mention is that some administrators are obviously new in their role here, and maybe some admin missed the training last year in the spring, and so this month I've been reoffering those trainings. There's also an option for admin who already attended the trainings last year to attend a 90-minute skill practice session where we get to do some role play work around restorative practices. So it's not just me talking about the processes, but actually admin getting the chance to practice facilitating. So I mentioned I would talk more about the completed restorative processes that I facilitated last year. So this is just data from last year for processes that I went out into the schools and facilitated. So there were 30 incidents, and you could see the majority, a total of 9, were related to peer conflicts, followed by 5 surrounding allegations of harassment on the basis of race. The third most frequent incident was around intimidation, harassment, hazing. The other category, you can see there's 5 there. I grouped 5 individual incidents, so there are 5 separate incidents in that other category. During last school year, a total of 287 students and staff participated in the ones that I facilitated, and 27 out of 30 of them were successfully completed, meaning they ended with all individuals co-creating agreements to repair the harm that was caused, and in turn, those agreements were followed up upon and completed. Individuals involved in these processes reported sentiments of having a sense of repair and restoration around the harm caused. The types of restorative interventions for the 30, there were 12 restorative justice conferences, 12 restorative circles, and 6 mediations. 11 incidents involved elementary age students, 8 were at the middle level, and 8 were at the high school level, and 3 were amongst teachers, admin, or a combination of both. So I'm also helping with incidents at the staff-related level as well. So this is looking at our data in VizLab around restorative interventions. So this is looking at it more from a district-wide perspective for this school year so far alone, so 2022-23 school year. So as of Friday of last week, there have been documented 1,445 behavior incidents in VizLab. 349 were resolved through a restorative resolution. So that's roughly 24% were resolved through a restorative resolution, which is actually the largest resolution type so far for this school year. So that's exciting. There are lots of resolution types. That's why 24% seems low, but it still is the largest. Our Latinx students have 562 behavior incidents reported this year, of which 117, or 20.8%, that were resolved through a restorative intervention. Our white students have had 883 behavior incidents reported this year, of which 193, or 21.9%, were resolved through a restorative intervention. Therefore, there's no major significant disproportionality concerns so far this year as it relates to our Latino students versus our white students receiving restorative interventions. So that's something that we'll just continue to monitor, but that is an exciting piece to highlight.
Can you repeat just what you just said? I'm sorry.
Sure, yeah, let me go back. So essentially, you can see up there, of the 349 restorative interventions that were utilized so far this year, that were resolved through restorative interventions, 117 of those were for the Latinx students. So 117 restorative interventions out of 562 behavior incidents. So that means 20.8% for Latino students were resolved through restorative interventions versus 21.9% for white students. So there's no significant disproportionality in terms of who's receiving restorative interventions.
Thank you.
Yeah. That doesn't negate the fact that there still is disproportionality in the larger numbers, but did want to mention that. Okay, so beginning in November of 2021 up until now, I've done about 20 trainings with an average of about 27 people at each training. 504 people have been trained in restorative practices so far. Those people include all the SSAs, the school safety advocates, at least one administrator in every school, all of our school counselors, mental health advocates, and teachers, and we're going to continue looking at how we can train other people in the building, so other folks that are in the building, not just those people mentioned. A total of about 36 hours of training has been conducted, and some of the sentiments we've heard from these folks that have received training include an appreciation of having a restorative practices toolkit, having a point person at the district level. They've also expressed that this work is what's going to make the difference in disproportionate discipline. Many have shared the value added of giving students the opportunity to learn from mistakes and re-engage in different behavior next time. And I'm almost done, I promise. So the Restorative Practices Toolkit, I mentioned that I created this. So the image on the right there is page 1 of 2 of the toolkit. It contains many resources, scripts, and templates around restorative practices. I just wanted to highlight a couple resources contained in it. So the first one I want to highlight is a document that discusses the intersection of the discipline matrix and which restorative process might be appropriate to use depending on the type of behavior. It also contains a restorative reentry conference script that I recently created. So that's for students returning back to the school after a suspension or expulsion. A reentry process is required for admin to complete for any student returning back to school. And so the script I created just really ensures that there's a restorative lens to that standard reentry process. Lastly, the toolkit has a folder that I also recently created that is for our administrators when dealing with discipline that provides skill building alternatives to suspensions for students. And so what's on the horizon as we look ahead, I'll continue to evaluate restorative interventions and race and ethnicity data entered to ensure equitable use of restorative practices. I'll continue to offer refresher and ongoing trainings and skill practice learning opportunities for folks in the building. I'll continue to facilitate restorative processes and provide coaching to our administrators who are dealing with discipline in the schools. And I just started recently doing targeted support and intervention planning in a couple schools that have high percentages of behavior incidents. And then lastly, I just developed a public-facing page on our website around restorative practices, and it also includes tips for restorative practices at home as well that parents can use. So thank you for this opportunity to present. Does anyone have any questions?
Beth? And then Stacy, sorry.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate all the work you've done. Just one quick question. I am curious if we're tracking any data around the restorative practices toolkit, and if people are utilizing it, who's utilizing it, in what environments are we seeing it used the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not tracking that, but I would love to. It is interesting because I'll pop into it multiple times throughout the day, and there's usually several people in it, which is exciting. But that doesn't really give a standard answer. But that's interesting. I'll check into that.
I appreciate that. No, I just think it could be informative, right? If we're seeing it used more on the secondary level versus whatever, it could be helpful.
Stacy?
I don't have a question. I just want to commend you because having only been here a year, this is a lot. It's super impressive, so thank you.
I appreciate that. I will say that it's been so nice working in this district, coming from Florida where I was doing this work, and it often felt like I was pushing a big boulder up a mountain, and here it's when I met with admin last year, they were already so receptive and open, and so many schools were already using many of these practices, so it gives me a lot of hope.
Kitty?
Yes, I want to echo what everybody else said. Thank you so much. This is an awful lot that's gotten done. So I just had a question on the 1,445 behavior incidents. Is that a common number? Do you even know? I mean, it sounds enormous to me.
I'm happy to answer that. I believe it's close to being on trend to last year. I don't know that it's significantly more or less, but you have to remember not all of the behavior incidences. Sometimes, 1 in 5 of those we're able to use restorative practices. Sometimes we're using conferencing. So we have more data to provide to the board in our next strategic plan metric presentation where we'll look at some of the disproportionality that we're still seeing in discipline. I'm looking at Dr. De La Cruz. Is that coming soon?
I don't know where that is on the calendar, but we do have that on tap.
So we'll speak more to the discipline and where we are in trends year over year during that presentation.
What kinds of behaviors get entered in? Is it a database
Yep, so as you all recall, board members, a couple of years ago, there was no way for us to, we didn't even have a common way to track the things that students were being disciplined for, right? And so, board created a very strong policy that guided staff's practice. We developed a discipline matrix that created different codes that schools could then use. And now what we do on a quarterly basis, semi-annual basis, is we review those codes, review the matrices to see if the matrices are actually indeed supporting and serving the needs of what's happening. Looking at where there's disproportionality within the matrices, trying to figure out if that's our adults in the system misusing the matrices, or if the matrices do need to be edited and changed as we put in the policy that would be reviewed on an annual basis. And so we've done a lot of work. If we would have had this conversation a few years ago on what's happening in the district, nobody could really answer it. But now we have specific numbers. We're knowing what's happening. We're understanding that the board's priorities, our district's priority on restorative practices is taking root. And we're able to track information over time in ways that we just weren't able to do prior to board's policy and some of the changes we've made from district administration.
Thank you.
Nicole?
I just wanted to say thank you for this presentation. And then one thing that caught my attention, because I often feel like I hear from members of the community, sometimes staff, is we're talking a lot about restorative justice, but we're not feeling it or not seeing it consistently. And I liked the time scale of where we've been, where we're headed, and that it takes 3 to 5 years for this to really kind of take over and take hold. And so I appreciated hearing that aspect, just to ground my expectations, community expectations around how quickly this good work can become ingrained in the day-to-day habits in our buildings.
Thank you.
Richard, Lisa?
Do we have an opportunity for incidents that wouldn't normally be referred to restorative justice? Is there a way for folks to request that occurs?
Yeah, so even if on the discipline matrix, level 1 and 2 incidents are usually typically referred to restorative, but level 3 and 4 often require different discipline consequences, but that doesn't mean that a restorative process can't be used. Does that answer your question?
It does, I think. So it's
Yeah.
possible if a student or parents were aware that we had this and that their situation didn't qualify, they could see whether or not an exception could be made or whether or not their situation might fit in.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, a restorative process could be used for really any situation, from low level all the way up to murder. Honestly, there's restorative justice used in many parts of the world and our own country where that's used.
I appreciate that. I hope we don't have too many murders on
No.
campus this year. And I appreciate you taking the time tonight and waiting so long to give this presentation. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Just have a couple of questions on the practices that you do and the 30 that you have done. The outcome of the practice, does that turn into like a contract with students? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so there's a form that we use in any single restorative process that's called the restorative agreement form. And it's the students and admin, whoever's in that process, coming up with ways to repair the harm that was caused and to come up with ways to prevent that from happening again. So we get really specific with them. We write it down. We write they come up with when they want to have that done by. Many of the things are ongoing. And then they all sign it, and there's formality around that. And then the administrator usually will follow up. The idea is to follow up within a week or maybe 2 weeks to check in with the students to see how those agreements are being followed.
So if there was any damage done or anything like that, is there like a restitution clause in there where payback is allowable, or what? How does that work?
That could be an option. Yeah, I haven't done any restorative processes where monetary restitution was required, but there was an elementary incident last year where vandalism was done on school property with masks. Cutting in the bathroom stalls, and so the students wanted to fix the bathroom stalls, and so they came in with the principal on the Saturday with their parents, and they epoxied the bathroom stalls and fixed them all up with the janitor or with the custodian, and it was a great experience. So the opportunities for repair are really up to what the group wants to do, but usually it's logically tied, like logical consequences. It's tied to what happened.
That's cool. Now, does it require a parent signature or any kind of an adult to sign off on whatever happens with that agreement?
Yeah, so administrators will follow up with parents on what the agreements are that the students came up with in the process. Parents are invited to participate in the pre-meetings, so that's with their student and me or the facilitator of the process. And then when we pull the students, and it's always voluntary, so then when we pull the students together, it's just the students, administrator, and the facilitator of the process, but there is follow-up with the parents and communication back with them.
And I know I don't need to even ask the question, but I'll ask it anyway. You do have interpretation and translation if the parents are involved in the process, right?
Yes, I always do. I've been involved in several where that's the case.
Excellent.
Yep.
Now, I have, and I think it's more for our esteemed superintendent here. Out of the 562 behavior incidents, do we have or will we have an indication in terms of what schools and is it 3 or 4 schools that are providing all the behavioral incidents, or what does that look like?
We can give a more broad district overview the next time we present our strategic plan metrics. But for individuals who are interested in their individual schools, they can go right now to our strategic plan metrics dashboard, which is the beauty of the dashboard when there's curiosities, questions, how those things are happening. That is accessible to everyone in our community, and they're free to go through, look at some of that information. We did just recently update that information, and so they're able to check in. But we'll give a more broader overview, talking about what are the codes that we're seeing that we're having questions about. Are there certain individual groups of schools where more discipline incidents are happening, and what's happening there? I will say that between that now in that presentation, we've already had those conversations at the cabinet level, and we're working individually with schools where we're seeing an uptick in discipline or trends that we feel like need some adjustment or additional resources and support. Again, and we're able to do that because this board set strategic plan metrics, because of the policies and the priorities, and altogether for all student strategic plan.
Thank you again very much, and thank you for your presentation and your hard work, and I agree with who Nicole said that in a year, or was it Kitty? I don't know, but you've done, was it you? Oh, sorry, Stacy. Stacy, that you've done a lot since you've gotten here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We'll call on you and then I'll talk. Go ahead, Rob. You talk, then I'll talk. Go ahead.
I just want to just publicly appreciate Janelle and all the work that she's done, and just we're so glad to have her expertise here in our district as we are just making great strides in this area. So it's always great when you all get to meet members of our team doing really great work. So just a pleasure to have you here this evening, Janelle.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Many years ago, I have Elena Shively come and teach my law school class on restorative practices, and that's when I learned how kind of haphazard our restorative practices were in the district. And it sounds like everyone should know what it is. It sounds simple, right? Restorative practice, we should all know. And there's such a methodology to it. And I really appreciate you bringing that to the district and seeing how that works. I just have just a couple quick questions. So, kind of following up on what Lisa and Richard said, so you have tiers of behavior that kind of follow with what the consequences would be. Does a parent get involved with that decision? Who makes that decision ultimately? Is it you with the principal? How are those decisions made when, because I think some of them are probably pretty interpretive by the person who's seeing the behavior sometimes, if it's right, if it's like a behavior as opposed to something where somebody actually hit somebody. So how are those decisions made, and are the parents involved in that, or is it just you and the principal, or how do they decide?
Yeah, so the Student Support Services team, before I got here, created something called the discipline matrix, so it became really clear and evident what the behaviors are and what the level of response could be. So it's like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And so they give in that document opportunities for what can be said or done in response to the behavior. And so for level 1 and 2, restorative process is an option for those incidents. So it's not, willy-nilly saying, oh, this happened and we're going to respond in this way. The administrators know that they are expected to follow the discipline matrix.
But more kind of what Lisa said, so let's say it's a 3 and 4, and the parent, do you ask the parent, because the parent could say, yes, I really think this would benefit my child more than another type of discipline, or how are those decisions made?
It's made by the administrator at the school, and sometimes they'll call student support services team if they have questions about that. Yeah.
And I got really excited at thinking about how we could take this kind of training to our families, right?
Yeah.
To add to your to-do list.
Well, yeah.
I think it would be pretty exciting for families to learn kind of how to implement some of these restorative practices. And the other thing that struck me as is staff on staff. Right? You had a very small bar there, but it seems to make a whole lot of sense to have these restorative practices available when there's staff conflict, because I think that's pretty inevitable too in a district our size. So I think that was pretty exciting to see you doing that work as well. So I'm super excited about this work. Thank you for moving from Florida. I guess that's where you were. And helping us with this. So I really look forward to the next update.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm actually presenting to Capel tomorrow night, so that's the first parent group that I'm presenting to, but I definitely want to start doing more of those, especially with the web page for restorative practices at home.
Richard, did you have something else?
Nope.
Okay.
Sidebar, sorry.
That's okay, just wanted to make sure. Anyone else? Thank you very much.
No, when she mentioned couple, I said, oh, that's the meeting I'm going to be at.
What?
When she mentioned couple, I said, that's the meeting I'm going to be at.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Right, Rob, I'm turning it over to you again to do the next introduction.
Thank you very much. Another exciting presentation for this evening. Board members, we're so lucky. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nativity Miller and Shannon Gamble, who's been leading our MTSS work. Board members, MTSS, which stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports, we've started and stopped it multiple times in BVSD over the years. And I would say that this time's different. And I'm not just saying that. I'll explain to you why it's different. When you don't have the instructional infrastructure that's consistent across the district, right? We've talked for years now about prioritization of standards, scope, and sequencing. It is really tough to take intervention, classroom intervention, in addition to interventions outside of the classroom, special education services, other services. It's very difficult to take those to scale because they're connected specifically to what we would refer to as Tier 1 instruction, which is the first time materials presented to students. That's what makes this rollout differently. The work that we've been doing with our instructional infrastructure, prioritization of standards, scope and sequencing, some common implementation of instructional materials, think about the work that we've done in literacy over the years, has really set us up for a great deal of success with MTSS. I will say that board members, just the last comment, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Miller. 2 years ago, I brought a reorganization to this Board of Education that created the Assistant Superintendent of Opportunity and Access. That has allowed Dr. Miller to focus on this effort. I will tell you that MTSS is one of the key strategies that any school district will use to close growth gaps, opportunity gaps, and achievement gaps. So I'm excited for them to present to you this evening. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. We're prepared to answer those. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Miller.
All right, thank you so much. Good evening. Good evening, Board President Gebhardt, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. Tonight, we're grateful to be sharing the extensive amount of work that our multi-tiered systems of support team has engaged in over the course of the last year. Our team is led by Director Shannon Gamble, who took a significant amount of time last year doing a needs assessment of multi-tiered systems of support, identifying areas of focus to better support our students and educators through the MTSS process so that ultimately we can meet the needs of our students on multiple levels. The work that we have engaged in over the last year is aligned to our strategic plan in two areas: challenging, engaging, and relevant instruction with the implementation of our data-driven instructional practices, as well as through customized supports through our redevelopment and rollout of the MTSS system and structure that we will share with you this evening. With that, I am really happy to introduce Mrs. Shannon Gamble, who is our MTSS Director.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to share with you the great progress that we've made in the area of MTSS. And I'd like to start with the first question that I always get. What does MTSS stand for? What does it actually mean? MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered System of Supports. It is defined as a prevention-based framework using team-driven shared leadership and data-based problem solving to improve the outcomes of every student through family, school, and community partnerships, comprehensive assessment, and a layered continuum of supports. In MTSS, implementation science and universal design for learning are employed to create one integrated system that focuses on increasing academic and behavioral outcomes to equitably support the varying needs of all students. In a nutshell, MTSS is a system that all schools have in place to make sure students have the just right level of support to help them succeed. The Colorado Department of Education refers to our state framework as co-MTSS, and BVSD is aligned with this state model. CDE has identified 5 essential components of MTSS. The first is a comprehensive screening and assessment system, which is the coordinated effort of gathering information across multiple measures to support decision-making at the system and student level for the whole child. Families, early childhood programs, schools, and communities actively partner to develop, implement, and evaluate effective and equitable practices to improve educational outcomes for children and youth. Team-driven shared leadership outlines the teaming processes and structures that focus on distributing responsibility and shared decision-making across and within regions, districts, and schools to effectively design and use systems for training, coaching, resources, implementation, and evaluation. Data-based problem solving and decision-making is a continuous improvement process used by teams to collect, analyze, and evaluate information to inform decision-making at the system and student levels. And finally, the layered continuum of supports, which includes evidence-based practices, instruction, and interventions. This ensures that every student receives equitable whole child supports that are evidence-based, culturally responsive, matched to their need, and developmentally appropriate through layered supports. There are also many myths and misconceptions out there about MTSS, and I'd like to dispel a few here. MTSS is not a single response or an intervention program. It is a system that includes responses and interventions among many other elements. It is not only about a response to students, it is for all staff and school-wide systems, taking into account leadership, teacher preparedness, school culture, and resource allocation. It is not only for one school point person to facilitate, but for multidisciplinary problem-solving teams to make decisions about levels of support needed and the effect that these supports or interventions are having on student learning. MTSS is not only for academics, it is for all students incorporating academics, but also socio-emotional wellness, attendance monitoring, enrichment and differentiation for diverse learners, as well as family and community partnerships. And MTSS is not a pathway to special education. While MTSS data that is used to improve the effectiveness of a student's instruction or their intervention may also be used as part of the evaluation procedure for special education referral, MTSS systems should not become a fast track or a barrier to special education. So how do we take such a comprehensive, lofty framework such as this and make it operationalized in schools? I'll share with you 3 focus areas and some achievements and next steps from our MTSS team. Last year, our team took time to evaluate the current state of things. We knew that now more than ever, students need customized supports and teachers need easier ways to provide them and make sure that they're effective. The 3 areas we've identified are district systems and resources, data-driven instruction, and the student support process. I will walk us through each one, sharing the needs, progress, and improvements, as well as next steps. Let's start with the district systems and resources. For the district as a whole, we knew that we needed more consistent practices and expectations, greater alignment to the state framework, readily available MTSS resources for schools, as well as an improved system to document and monitor interventions. Here's where we've made some progress in this area. First, we are incredibly proud of our new MTSS guide, which is a one-stop shop for teachers and school leaders. Having all of our thoughtfully vetted resources available as part of the instructional playbook is increasing coherence across all of our schools. We also continue to make improvements with Frontline, our online management system. In Frontline, teachers document intervention plans and supports for students. Last year, we worked with a stakeholder group to identify a simpler, more intuitive format to ensure that we were capturing the most essential information about student supports. We want to help educators make this critical record keeping as simple and efficient as possible. Finally, we partnered with our content specialists to add a bank of intervention strategies to the instructional playbook to provide teachers with some evidence-based and easy-to-implement intervention strategies in the classroom. To continue to improve our district systems and resources for MTSS, we would like to expand the intervention strategy bank, develop an MTSS workbook in VizLab that will help our principals monitor at a glance the effectiveness of their multi-tiered system of supports and help inform their decisions about resource allocations and professional development related to MTSS. Our team is also spending this year engaging a task force to refresh our district guidelines around positive behavioral interventions and supports, or PBIS. A critical element of MTSS, this is a lot of letters, PBIS establishes and maintains effective school environments that maximize academic achievement and behavioral competencies for all learners. Our second area of focus is data-driven instruction. We know that we need to support more consistent approaches to analyzing student data, with connecting the data analysis to teacher actions that impact students, and that in order to do this well, we need to provide ongoing professional learning and coaching for our teachers and leaders. We have demonstrated progress in this area in 3 ways. First, we have developed a district protocol to provide a consistent structure for analyzing standards-based student data. This protocol was the center of professional learning for all of our school administrators all of last year. Second, our team has established a professional learning cohort for school-based teacher leaders who are facilitating data conversations with their colleagues. This community engages in deep learning and builds meaningful relationships with one another. And finally, we have added 2 district data coaches who are embedded, providing direct support to 10 schools. These schools have been identified as our high or targeted support schools with high levels of readiness for implementation of DDI. So what's next for DDI? We will continue to support schools with implementation through professional development and coaching. The third and final area I will focus on is the student support team process. The student support team process is the collaborative way in which school teams use data to respond to student needs at various levels of intensity. It's our data-based problem-solving and decision-making process. As a district, we identified a need for much greater alignment in the way that we respond to student needs and an increase in the use of data to make decisions. In order to address these needs, we worked with a group of stakeholders to develop a data-based problem-solving and decision-making flowchart to provide our schools clear guidance on the steps to take as they increase or decrease supports to students, and to indicate how and when data is used to drive the decisions. This same stakeholder group co-created meeting protocols for MTSS meetings, which schools are using to keep their meetings efficient, thoughtful, and focused on the right outcomes. And finally, throughout the development of all of these resources, we've maintained a close connection with the balanced assessment framework, ensuring cohesion across district initiatives. As with the other areas of focus, you'll see that our next steps include continued professional learning. Our team is also focused deeply on the data-based problem-solving and decision-making component of MTSS this year, and all of our professional development is aligned to this key element of MTSS for this year. We know that growing in these practices will take time and ongoing support, and we're committed to providing it. Moving forward, we look forward to partnering with our other district teams to ensure that schools are meaningfully engaging families in the student support process and in MTSS as a whole. So now that you've listened to me tell you all about MTSS and all the great work that's happening, I'd like to be able to show you some of this in action. So we have a short video here that will give you a glimpse of some collaborative, data-driven MTSS work that's happening at Birch Elementary School. In this video, you'll hear from Principal Tanya Santi, interventionist Kelly Anderson, and parent Jennifer Rising.
What does EE say? E. And where does it normally go in a word?
In the middle. So our MTSS program is our multi-tiered system of supports, and it's in place to make sure that every kid in the school is getting the right level of supports that they need. So we're making sure that kids who are struggling are getting caught right away, and we're putting in different levels of intervention to make sure that they can be successful at school and they can achieve their full potential.
We take a look at that student's data, we talk about that student's needs, we meet with that student's parents, we bring the counselor in if it's a social emotional issue, if the student's learning English, we bring the ELD teacher in, and then we really start tracking data. So we put a really specific intervention in place in the classroom.
That's where I come in and I'll pull them into small groups and we'll work on filling in those gaps. And then while we're doing that, I'm tracking data weekly and making sure that the intervention is working.
And if the student is not showing growth as a result of that intervention, then we move the student on to the next level, which is a whole team meeting where we bring in experts from around the building and sometimes from the district to think about what supports we need to give at the next level.
Just being in that type of environment is so reassuring that whatever my kids are going to be going through at any one time, they're going to be taken care of, and they're going to grow, and they're going to continue to learn and have a great positive experience in elementary school, which is a foundational opportunity for the rest of their schooling career.
And it's really building this really inclusive environment here, community, where the kids are put first and they're getting what they need, and everyone knows that they can depend on each other, that they can build off that.
We're so impressed with the great work that's happening with the team at Birch and how they're leveraging their multi-tiered system of supports to improve outcomes for students every day. So as I wrap up, I will summarize our areas of progress. We have our district systems and resources, including the MTSS Guide, Frontline Improvements, and the Intervention Strategy Bank. Data-driven instruction, including the DDI protocol, the Data Leads Learning Cohort, and district data coaches. And the student support process, including the data-based problem-solving and decision-making flowchart, as well as the MTSS meeting structures and protocols, and connections to the balanced assessment framework. Thank you for your time tonight and allowing me to share all the great work that our team is doing. Are there any questions?
Well, wait, Stacy? No. Okay. Richard?
Thank you for the presentation. That was wonderful to hear. On one of the slides, I think it was maybe the second or third slide, you talked about the pyramid that you received from the Department of Education, and it's got all those different. There you go, that one. On the family, school, and community partnership, how does that work? I mean, can you describe that just a little bit more and see how that works here?
Yes. So as I mentioned, when we think about next steps, I think it's important to know that as we're building our capacity intentionally with the system, we're focusing on one or maybe two of these components at a time. And so next year is the year we're going to go deeply into how we in BVSD define this element within MTSS. I can tell you that all of the amazing work that Ari is doing with our family partnerships is completely aligned with what the state defines as the key practices within family, school, and community partnerships for MTSS. And so what we see as our work really won't be undoing or creating anything. It's really going to be about taking our work that's already going on in the district and presenting it as a cohesive whole.
So the work will be presented to that family community partnership group, what Ari's doing through the FET, or?
I think that, there's a couple of approaches. Certainly, I think that we need to get the word out on what MTS is and how the process is, right? I think that that's one element. But I think the more important element is developing protocols and processes where we make sure that any student who's not responding to Tier 1 instruction is being intentionally engaged by their teachers through protocols on how we all work together, family, community, school, student, to support that student that's within the process to get what they need. And so, yes, here's what it is, but also here's our commitment to you to engage you in this process in a much deeper way than is happening now, which is, again, Shannon is being very smart and the team is being very smart on how we implement, not too much at once because then nothing sticks. Go deep in some of the critical areas, and then next year really focusing on what are those guarantees that we're able to make to our parents to know and understand if they're falling behind, they'll be engaged in an MTSS process.
And I think I would add that at the school level, what's currently happening is that we're coaching our leaders to get parents involved early and often. So as soon as there's an onset where they may be going to an intervention or an enrichment, we need to be contacting parents to let them know, hey, we've identified this, they're gonna go with Mrs. Gamble, or she's gonna be getting extra support in the classroom. So that at the school level, the way I think of family and community partner is that our parents are in the know early and often with the needs of their students.
Thank you very much. A comment and then another question. The comment is I truly appreciate the what is not slide that you provided there, because a lot of our community members think that MTSS is a process for special ed. Okay, I'm glad to hear that it's not. The question that I have, the follow-up question that I have is a comment and then the question. It appears to be aligned a little bit with the Basic Literacy Act as it relates to, especially when I saw the video, where you had that group together and they were talking about literacy, et cetera, and it sounded like because one of the things that I do know is that the Basic Literacy Act requires parents to be involved in the development of the reading plans for their kids once they're identified. Unfortunately, that's not happening. But if it was aligned like that, I could see where that video, where the parent was there, they were talking about the literacy process or whatever they were doing with that child, it would seem like it would align very, very nice to that. Was that part of the thinking? I don't know. I'm rambling now, but it sounds like it could be a place where
and ironically, Today, Shannon and I were meeting with Michelle Quasi, who is our Director of Literacy, to also take our process for literacy and intervention and to align it to our problem-solving flow chart that we shared with you this evening. So it should align, and we looked for gaps where it wasn't aligning, and we need to vet it in a few more stakeholder groups, but we at our level have identified where we're missing things and where we need to add things so that they are aligned, and then we'll increase that practice at the school level when we're looking at literacy and literacy intervention needs.
That would be great. I think that would be another big step in terms of progress, because one of the things that I hear frequently is that parents are informed that their kids are reading significantly below grade level, et cetera, and here's a plan. Instead of, and we want to invite you to come and help develop a plan. So.
Lisa? So, Rob, this may be a question for you, and I'm looking at slide 14. And this all makes sense to me when you're looking at an elementary school. When you get to a middle and high school, my brain just shuts down. How does a teacher with 150 students implement this one chart for every one of their students that they think may need MTSS? It just feels impossible to me. So I'm just wondering how that works, Rob. When you, like I said, it made sense to me at the elementary school when you could have small groups and you've got the smaller one-on-one instruction and you've got the kind of supports you need. But as soon as you get to a middle school or a high school.
So it may look different, Kathy, to your point. Within our middle schools and high schools, many of them, luckily at this point in time, have built-in intervention or study skills or access time where some of these interventions can happen. The majority of MTSS starts in elementary school. We do have some kids that enter the progress, that aren't continuing but are new students to the process in middle school and high school. But I would say that it looks different. And Nativity or Shannon, if you want to maybe give some specific examples, but I would say that to your, I think that what you're saying is right in the sense that it can't be the same. But we do have other structures within those different levels that provide the opportunity to give that intervention. So I'll turn it over to the team to answer.
And I think one of the pieces that we're looking at is how do we leverage our DDI meetings that we had talked about earlier. And at the secondary level, we're looking probably more at as a group, right? So when we're having those conversations and we're saying that, we've identified 20 students who are below grade level in reading, and what do we have in place that we need to provide intervention for? And so the structure is in place to have the data meeting, and we're doing less of probably the one-on-one, and until we find that those interventions maybe aren't working at a tier 2, and we have students falling out of that, where then we would have more of a one-on-one conversation. I think structurally, what we're working with the secondary principals is on the organizational structure that they have to put in place to have those meetings happen. And so right now, as we do professional learning, we're starting to separate out elementary, middle, and high so that we can talk about what's different, because it's different, and structurally, what do they need, how they can leverage some of the things that they already have in place to have some of these discussions, whether that's a group, talking about students as a group as opposed to one-on-one, and then what interventions we have in place that we can serve students through that structure.
So this slide, like I said, makes sense to me in the elementary, but I don't know how you would ever implement this slide at a secondary level. Is that fair?
Yep. So one of the things we did with the secondary principals a couple months ago was we took this database problem-solving flow chart, and a lot of them have one in place at their school already. And so what they did is they did a crosswalk of the two and tried to identify if there was anything they had missing in the structures that they currently have in place. And so that's been our starting point, is to say, how are we problem solving student needs and what structures do we need to put in place to do that? So they have started that conversation and giving us feedback as well about what they need when we're providing that professional learning.
And is it fair to say that it isn't necessarily individual teachers on their own implementing? It's more of a team approach with counselors involved. And, high schools have been doing this for years as they've been working on, with kids typically behind in credits, what kids are failing a certain number of classes, what are the protocols that high schools do schools use to take those kids, bring them into counseling, get them the support they need, maybe make some schedule changes, get them some credit recovery, so on and so forth. So there's similarities in that, but it's not, I'm the teacher, I have 150 kids, now I'm putting a kid through a data-based problem-solving and decision-making flowchart by myself. There's more of a team-based approach.
So Rob, for me, it just would be helpful to kind of see what this slide would look like, but at the secondary level. Like, how are we looking at this? Because I think, like you say, it's different. You're looking at groups of kids, you're looking at different structures. So I'm just trying to conceptualize what that looks like when you get to the middle and high school, to the secondary level.
I do have some teacher round tables coming up at high schools. Maybe we could try to string something together. I don't know.
Okay, I mean, I'm excited about it. We've gone from RTI to this, and I'm hoping we can stick with this for a while because it makes a lot of sense to me. But like I said, I'm just trying, I guess what's stuck in my head are the headlines today about math scores across the country. And so I'm trying to figure out, and our math scores aren't so great either. So how do you apply this to and it was middle school math scores that were really awful. And you don't have to answer that question now. I'm just trying to figure out how all this pulls together so that we can kind of take ourselves out of that math nosedive.
Well, we're thinking about that a lot as well. And I would say that math is as much a tier 1 issue as it is a tier 2 and tier 3 issue. That your first instruction, we need to be aligning quality to standards and the depth of the standards in middle school mathematics for sure. More to come on that. We've been working on that. And so I think we have some exciting news that we'll be able to share, certainly at our mid-year budget update, revised budget, where we have some plans to do some things there. But we are thinking about that, but we'll continue the conversation. We could probably keep talking, but.
Well, and I'm thinking about our earlier presentation. This is like new. You guys just did the needs survey, and you're just starting to implement this, so I wasn't expecting that we would have all the answers today. But it's exciting, and I'm really looking forward to more updates on it.
Thank you.
Board members, any other questions? So I think the next item, we're turning over to Kathleen. Can I go directly to her? Do you want to introduce Kathleen to the, okay. I think we do.
It's so exciting to be able to work with Shannon and Janelle that the board already saw tonight. It really is such a gift to have incredible colleagues and professionals that are moving this work forward. So I am here just to talk about open enrollment. So we have regulation JECC-R before the board. The board will remember that under your policy process, the board takes notice of regulations. This is not something that you adopt or vote on. This is also a policy regulation that we have committed to touching more than once this year. We know that there is work to be done, substantive work in looking at the equity principles behind some of our criteria, and that is slated for this spring, and we've already engaged the DAC policy subcommittee on that work. Tonight, we are looking at doing the cleanup that is vital and necessary to our ability to run the open enrollment process this school year. That process begins and opens November 1st with families considering those applications, and then the lottery itself will run in January. I took some fair time to explain this in the agenda, but the main cleanup that we need, there are a few things. Preschool has radically changed, so we have to make sure we don't communicate bad information there. We've also had some changes to the law when we look at when and how we consider a student's status as an individual with a disability in open enrollment. So we've cleaned those issues up in the language that's presented for you tonight. We also are adopting new enrollment software, which is a really exciting development. And it required a few tweaks to policy also. So those are the red lines that are in this regulation that the board has given notice of tonight.
Board members, questions? Nicole?
Thanks for this. I appreciate the commitment to review some of the equity issues on this policy later this year. Questions on this one, I noticed under Community Montessori, it talks about kids that might be participating in full or versus part-time kindergarten. Do we still have a part-time option available for kindergarten, or is that something we have as a district?
We do have that as a family choice option, is my understanding.
Thank you. And then with some of the general information, a lot of it doesn't feel policy related. Is that something that you're also going to be reviewing later in the semester? It feels like it could be information on a website and not necessarily worthy of board policy.
Yes, thank you. And this is where you can really tell that time on the DAC policy subcommittee gives you a particular eye. Yes, I share those concerns that it feels a little handbooky or website to me. And those are changes. Those are corrections we're making as a system when we look at our policies. But in order not to really agitate my colleagues in our community, given the shortness that we have between revising this regulation and opening the process, I did reserve that serious haircut for spring.
Thank you. And one last comment, I think it is great that this process is changing for an accepting versus denial of a position. That's always been a long-standing confusion with folks in this community. And just wanted to see, aside from this policy, how are we communicating that process out so parents that may have been used to our previous process and were confused by it every year know that it is different and you actually have to take action to stay versus the inverse.
Yes, thank you for that. We definitely are working with our communications department. They've been very involved in the revisions to this process. So we're definitely talking with them. We will also be working with our administrators next week to roll out these changes to the open enrollment process to make sure all our schools know. And then the enrollment system itself will look and feel different. And I understand we'll prompt those questions and have a lot of explanation when families are actually in the system doing the process. But it's certainly something we're paying a lot of attention to.
Thanks.
Board members, any other questions? No? So Kathleen, can you walk us through kind of what the next step is? We don't take any action on this, but it'll become the regulation and we will, Rob, did you have something?
Yeah, the board's process by its own policy, the regulation takes effect in 30 days, which will be well in advance of when any lottery will actually run. It will be sort of tacitly implemented through that application process, but nothing will happen until after that 30-day window passes.
Okay, thanks. Anything else, board members? I think we have moved on to, yep, I don't think there's anything on legislative yet, fortunately. So now we're moving to action items, consent grouping. Hold on one second. Okay, Stacy?
I'm wondering when we're going to talk about that family leave thing.
That will be coming on your November agenda. It's complicated, which is why we provided a little advance info.
Okay. All right, consent grouping. 8.1, personnel items. 8.2, approval of minutes, October 11, 2022, regular meeting. 8.3, approval of minutes, October 18, 2022, special meeting. 8.4, acceptance of donation, Bear Creek Elementary. 8.5, acceptance of donation, Louisville Elementary. 8.6, cancellation of November 22nd, 2022, regular and special meetings. 8.7, Casey Middle School Priority Improvement Plan. 8.8, joint use agreement between Boulder Valley School District Number RE2 and the Colorado Chautauqua Association. And 8.9, out-of-district agreement. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? All right, board members, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Stacy, seconded by Nicole. Can you call the roll, please?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Hold on a second. I didn't ask if there's any discussion on the consent agenda. Is there any discussion on consent agenda items? I stand corrected. I should have asked, but there isn't any, so we can continue with the roll.
Garcia.
I'm still a yes.
Okay. Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the next action item is approval of the Boulder County ARPA-funded award in agreement with Boulder County. Board members, is there a motion to approve this action item? Kitty moved. Second. Stacy moves. Discussion?
I do have a question on that because I believe it's asking like for $200,000 to fund for 2 years. I guess some enhancement on counseling, or what was it? I can't recall. But my question was basically is what happens after the 2 years?
Rob?
After the 2 years, we'll have to either look for another grant or evaluate if that position is going to continue. I mean, these positions are end dated because they're with one-time funds, not recurring funds.
Does that answer your question, Richard?
It does, but it sounds like it's really a key position that's going to serve the district well.
Certainly, we'll have to consider that as we think about budget priorities as we move forward in 2 years. We think this is a great opportunity, provides a counselor for 2 years to support the students that we serve. So we feel like it's a good move. And then to your point, Richard, if it's something that we need to continue, we need to either find new dollars or reallocate dollars we're spending on something else to continue to provide it.
All right, Laura, can you call the roll on this?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the final action item for tonight is 9.3, District Unified Improvement Plan. Rob, do you want to just run us through how we got here?
I sure do. As board members, as you recall at our last board meeting, Dr. Dings presented to you the draft Unified Improvement Plan. We received feedback per statute from District Accountability Committee. We asked for feedback from the Board of Education on the draft plan. We made adjustments accordingly. Kitty gave us some grammatical changes. We checked in with leadership from District Accountability Committee on the edits that they suggested, and we integrated. They gave us one additional edit around the use of data in one of our priority improvement areas. Not that, I'm using the wrong terminology. We integrated their one comment, and so and DAC assigned DAC leadership was very thankful that we were receptive of their feedback. We've integrated this. We feel like that this district unified improvement plan is a great community product of district staff, board input, DAC leadership, and it's for your approval this evening.
Board members, is there a motion to approve 9.3? Moved by Stacy, seconded by Nicole. Is there any discussion after hearing Rob's explanation of the, we've had this before us a couple times, but I just want to make sure there's no other conversation or questions. Kitty?
Yes, this isn't specifically on this, but do we still have the biggest achievement gap in the state?
I don't believe so. I don't know that there's a that there's a ranking that comes out that because there's lots of places where you could measure gaps, right? Certainly, even though that we're not the biggest in the state, our gaps aren't okay. And I think that we continuously own that and speak to that and measure that and work to change that. But I would say that we are seeing some progress. I would say that what I could point you to, while it's not measuring achievement gaps, it does consider achievement and growth of all students, and that's our district-wide performance framework, where we're the highest rated district in the Denver metro, and 2 points away from being distinguished. And so, but still a long way to go. And as every time we present at every board meeting, board members, I hope you see and understand the intentionality, the coherence, the work that's happening across our system in different departments, divisions, but along the same lines, aligned with our All Together for All Students strategic plan. This district unified improvement plan just strengthens those efforts, makes deeper commitments to our community, holds us more accountable, gives us more things to measure. I think that we're heading certainly in the right direction, and we've got really talented people that are working with us. So.
And Rob, I think I remember you saying that due to the great work we've done with the Sanchez's and some of the work we're doing with UVA, we've actually brought those scores that we were struggling with up. And so I do think we're closing that gap in ways that we hadn't seen before. So I think it's great work.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have so much to be proud of and still so much more work to do, right, which just makes this job fun and interesting.
All right, any other questions, board members, on this one? Richard?
I have a question. This is the district UIP, correct?
Yes.
How does that impact the school UIPs?
So school UIPs work with their school accountability committees to work on individual issues. There's tie-ins to both our strategic plan and our district's unified improvement plan. If you want a more specific answer, I could ask Jonathan to come up and speak to it, but I believe that's the gist of that. There's an alignment. The district's UIP serves as a North Star really for each school improvement plan.
That's okay, Jonathan. You don't have to march all the way up here. It's just a question that I had because in the UIP, based on the recommendations that DAC made and other board members have made, and the Latino Parent Advisory Council, Parents of Color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we wanted to make sure that you would include institutional racism barriers in there and all of that wonderful stuff, or not so wonderful stuff, but those particular obstacles. With the inclusion of that in the district UIP and as we see school UIPs, I don't see that on school UIPs. How does that align? I guess that's my question.
You thought you got to sit down, Jonathan.
Sorry, Jonathan.
That's okay. And look at that hustle. That's the commitment right there.
So the basic theme is each school writes its own plan with some help from us in making sure that they're looking at patterns and data and working through the model that we have. There's certainly some effort on our part when we roll out this plan in March and April to show it to principals and say, here are the areas we're working in, what actions ought we be taking. So the plans do definitely have some relationship that way. We need to support what happens in schools, but the wording of that plan and that work really varies by school and is meant to incorporate the feedback of the School Accountability Committee and teachers.
So based on the data that we've been seeing, the data we get from the schools, correct? and the data that we get from the schools based on their UIP programs provides us with the information we need for the district UIP program, correct?
In a manner of speaking, yes, but a lot of work is done by schools in the last month or so, and I wouldn't say that I'm continually reading each school's plan to see how it changes. It's much more that we're working on the similar types of strategies overall with some variation at certain schools.
Yeah, and I'm not, I guess what I'm asking is, since we're acknowledging the fact that there is some institutional racism or structural racism issues or barriers within the district, and we recognize that in the district UIP program. And I don't want to say that the schools ought to recognize that too, because, I mean, they have similar data sets probably. And I guess my question is, will they ever recognize the fact that there are institutional racism, structural racism issues?
I think the district UIP sets the stage for that, right? And again, we haven't mandated that. Jonathan hasn't gone through and updated the work that's been happening locally. That would not be honoring the work that's being co-created at each individual school. But I will say this, that the UIP process has gone from something that was merely compliance, fill it out, get it turned in by the date, right? Very disconnected and incoherent from school to school, right, to something that's very intentional, right, that is aligned to our strategic plan, that's ensuring coherence, whether it's instruction, intervention, assessment, discipline, right? Think about the presentations we'd had over the past semester, right? There is much more alignment now than I think that there has been, certainly since from when I started. Jonathan could speak to historically. I will tell you that as I speak to DAC leadership, that constantly every year that we were getting feedback that this is even better than the year previously. Now, we haven't arrived. We have work to do. But I do think that when you acknowledge that at the district level, it opens the opportunity for folks locally to begin to start to really thinking about those same barriers, owning them, appreciating the challenges that are there, naming them, just like we heard from our district accountability committee leadership members and from our Parents of Color Council, Latino Parent Advisory Council. And as they get involved in their SACs and they get involved in our schools, then we'll start to begin to see that begin to expand and grow. That would be my belief.
Well, thank you very much, Rob, and Craig, Jonathan. I'm hoping that our schools, with our approval of our UIP, will start using this whole notion of DEI and identifying institutional racism issues as a North Star, as for people to kind of look at that when they start developing their plans.
And Rob, to your point, prior to your tenure, I remember getting the UIP as like a consent item after it had already been submitted. So I'm very thankful to your fixing this process and engaging. Jonathan's laughing. Nobody has to take ownership of that, but I remember being super frustrated getting them after they were already submitted. So this process is much improved. Obviously, there's more things we can be doing, but thank you for taking this on and engaging our community and making sure that we're working the way that I think the statutes and the structure were meant to work and putting this together. So thank you.
And I have to thank Dr. Dings for all of his work in aligning this and making this a more valuable process, making this something that is entrenched and aligned with our strategic plan, knowing and understanding. Jonathan gives our entire team a critical eye on making sure that the things that we say we're doing, that we're able to evaluate the things that we say that we can evaluate. His talents with our improvements in strategy and our UIP process I can't say enough great things about the work that he's done. So, Jonathan, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So any other questions before we call the roll? All right, Laura, can you call the roll on this one, please?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Niznik.
Yes.
Rajpal.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zith.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So the last is agenda items from future agenda, and I know, Richard, you were telling us you had something for future agenda items?
Actually, I have a couple of things that I'd like to talk about for future agenda items, and I'm not sure whether my comment or my concern is something that can wait until January when we have our priority meetings. I really think that we should take a look at our special education policy.
Can you be more specific? That's kind of
Well,
broad.
when you're looking at some of the issues that I've been hearing in the community as it relates to information not being provided to families in the language that they, in their home language or in the language that they understand, is a big issue for me. And when I look at the policy, and I did look at the policy, it does say that the district has to abide by the federal regulations or federal laws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where it stops, you know, and I'm not sure whether we need to start looking at, or at least maybe I need to be educated a little bit more, whether the federal law does require the information that goes home to families around special education, IEPs, or any information should be in their home language as a requirement.
So Richard, it seems to me the way we've done this in the past is maybe you could send an RFI as a kind of a starter so that we're all operating off the same information, and then we can see how that goes. I know you've brought that up before, and I understand the urgency, but I think maybe that's the process that we've used, if you're okay with that.
I will do it.
And you said you had several, so
The
what
other
else?
one I think that I've been asking for a number of meetings already is the policy on community schools. I think community schools, I think we need to start looking at that again and start thinking about how do we really start providing, or at least look at the community schools policy as it relates to how it works with our nonprofit groups that do provide a service to the school district.
So again, Richard, maybe if there's a specific question, you could send an RFI so that we could figure out what the specific concern is so that we can address that, if you're okay with that as a process. And board members, any other board members have any other future agenda items? All right, is there a motion to adjourn? By Kitty, seconded by Nicole. We stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.